Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. I am covering a case today that you have really hammered me for. It's the case of Cinnamon Brown. Now, Alyssa Bustamante, Ana Kriegel, Mary Bell. Today we are covering the case of Cinnamon Brown. Now, before I give you a little tiny overview of the case, I'm just going to ask, if you do enjoy my content, please can you subscribe to my channel with the notification bell on? It would mean the world to me if you could engage with this video in some way. My analytics show that I have really good engagement when it comes to likes, but if you're liking the video, would it be possible, if I'm not asking too much, if you could also leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji, just to really get that interaction up and help push my videos out. But you know, now that I've been a complete beggar and embarrassed myself, I will now give you a little synopsis of this case. So the case of Cinnamon Brown, right? It makes you think about father-daughter relationships. Now, a lot of the time, fathers will say that they would do absolutely anything to protect their children, to protect their daughters. Some even say that they would kill for their daughter. But to what lengths would a daughter go to protect her father? At his request and at his manipulation? Well, the case of Cinnamon Brown is going to tell us just that. Without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Cinnamon Brown. So honestly, because I knew I'd be sitting for a long time, wearing a t-shirt today, and I've also got joggers on at the bottom. Usually it's pyjama bottoms or joggers anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm also going to stick to a more neutral look because I just feel like I need to. So Cinnamon Darlene Brown, she was born on July the 3rd of 1970, and she was born at Harbor General Hospital in Torrance of California, and she would be born to Brenda and David Brown. Now, Harbor General Hospital at this point wasn't really known for being the best conditions, shall we say, okay? Like, it wasn't very comfortable, not very cosy, not really the place that you could relax, and not the ideal place to give birth. The thing that I've just used on my eyebrow is like really red toned, and my eyebrows now look ginger. Not off to a great start, but we're going to work with it. So as I was saying, Harbor General, it wasn't the greatest hospital. I mean, the staff were pretty amazing. They really seemed to care about their patients, but the actual conditions was just a bit run down. So Brenda, when she was in labour, she really struggled to find any comfort in that hospital. And I guess with like this discomfort that she was feeling, it really just amplified the pain that she was in. I must be tired because I keep stuttering over my words, which is so bad. But anyway, so Brenda, despite being uncomfortable, she knew that it was all going to be worth it once she had her baby in her arms. Now, David Brown, on the other hand, he witnesses his wife in all of this discomfort and having to sleep in a bed that's uncomfortable. But the thing that really alarmed David about the whole hospital situation was the fact that there was only a sofa bed that he would have to sleep on if he was going to remain with Brenda for the 2 days that she was in labour. But he wouldn't, because he's selfish. So David Brown says to Brenda, like, this is great and all, but I am not staying here. Like, I can't stomach it. I can't sleep in this room. I can't lay on a sofa bed. I'm a grown man and I just can't stomach being that uncomfortable. God forbid he has to experience a bit of discomfort whilst his wife pushes a literal human out of a very tiny opening. So I'm just going to give a bit of background on Brenda and David's relationship, just so we can get a bit of insight into the family that Cinnamon was born into. They got together when they were both 15, and they kind of had troubled childhoods. I mean, would I say it's troubled? Maybe not, just a bit complicated. So the pair of them, they ran away when they were 16, and from what I could see, I think Brenda was an avid runaway. Like, it wasn't unusual for Brenda to go missing, Now, the pair of them had been married for just 2 months when Cinnamon Brown was born, when they were both 17. And as I was kind of saying, Brenda and David, the upbringing for them wasn't the easiest. The both of them were surrounded by financial hardship and financial difficulty. Now, Brenda, she was the oldest child of 11 siblings, so big family, not a lot of money, it's going to be a real struggle. And then David, he was the 6th of 8 children. So again, big family, big struggle when you're already in financial difficulty. Now, David, he said that he dropped out of school when he was 11 years old, and the reason for this was so he could go and work at a cafe and also a gas station so he could get money and buy himself some nice clothes. I don't know what kind of 11-year-old has any kind of work on their CV to land a job. So I should say resume for my American viewers. He must have been the best dressed 11-year-old walking about California. So when Brenda and David were both 17, they were really excited for Cinnamon to be born. Apparently her birth was highly anticipated. David said he was really excited to be a dad, but can he tell that to his face? Because he never looks happy. I can just imagine people asking David how he feels about becoming a dad and him being like, I'm so happy. Really trying to force a smile when really he's dreading it. Now, from the moment that Cinnamon was born, both Brenda and David, they believed that she was special. You know, she was going to have a good life. She was going to be a big name. And they thought, since she's so special and, just in case she becomes famous, she needs to have a good name that's different from the rest. So they named her Cinnamon Darlene Brown, and they really thought, movie star name. Now it turns out David, he really pushed for Cinnamon to have this special name because he too believed that he was special. And if he's special and he has a special name, his daughter should also have a special name. He genuinely believed he was something. And we're going to find out that he is something, a total piece of crap. So Cinnamon Brown, she was described as a very happy-go-lucky little girl. She was so outgoing, she was really social, she was kind, she always seemed so happy. And it wasn't just her family that said this, it was her friends as well. They always said that Cinnamon was someone who was just always in quite an upbeat mood, always ready to have fun, and her family and friends just adored her personality and the way she was. Obviously at this point, Brenda and David, they want to give Cinnamon the best life possible, and this really motivated them to turn her life around. And David, he went off and got his GED, and then he enrolled in a work programme as well. So David, he would train at the Data Control Institute, and this would really help pave the way for a career in computing for him, which at this point was, kind of a big deal. Big money was to be made in the computing industry. So he's off doing that, and at this point, Brenda, she is working in an office job, just trying to help pay the bills and build a life for themselves. So I'm sure we can all agree at this point in the case, it really seems like the family's working hard to build itself up, really establish itself. But unfortunately, this wouldn't last very long because David is a complete rat's ass. He was very possessive, he was extremely controlling of Brenda. She wasn't allowed to leave the house without him knowing where she was going and who she was going to be with. And to be honest, she never really got to leave the house anyway because David always wanted Brenda by his side. So he knew what she was doing and who she was with. So one day after work, David comes strolling in the house, he's in a good mood and he wants to speak to Brenda. So they get into this conversation and David says, Brenda, how would you feel granting me permission to date other women whilst we're married? Brenda thinks about it for 1 second and she's like, permission denied. We're not going to be a throuple. This is a 2-person marriage and if you don't like it, lump it. But it did seem like whatever Brenda said just fell on deaf ears because David, he went out and started an affair with a woman by the name of Laurie. When David and Brenda would eventually split, this would be a very, very messy breakup, and it even resulted in one point of David holding a gun to Brenda's head and threatening to kill her. Like, stand-up guy, right? So when the couple did eventually go their separate ways, David, he wound up marrying Laurie, you know, the woman he has an affair with, and then he tried to get primary custody of Cinnamon. However, the court ruled in Brenda's favour and she was granted primary custody of Cinnamon, and then David would get Cinnamon on the weekends. And of course, because Brenda had Cinnamon during the week, this often meant that she had to be the more serious parent. She was having to worry about getting Cinnamon ready for like nursery. She had to make sure she was eating her vegetables, and also had to make sure that any chores were done, like her toys were tidied away, that she cleaned up when she had been playing. And Cinnamon very early on started to view her mum as a bit of a nag, to be honest, and it would often result in arguments between the two, and this did continue from when Cinnamon was really young until she got older. When she was at school, Brenda made sure she was at school and that her homework was done. Their environment just seemed to be a bit more hostile, whereas David got Cinnamon on the weekends, so he's not working like Brenda was during the week and having to rush about and do everything. So when he's off at the weekends, he's seen as the really fun dad. He's playing with Cinnamon, he's taking her places, they're having fun, they're playing games, and he seemed like the fun parent. So at this point, David and Laurie, they decide that they are going to move into a home in Riverside, California in 1974. And at this point, David is 22 and Laurie is 19, which, you know, yeah, that's age appropriate. Fair enough. But his girlfriends are going to get younger and younger and younger. Too young. Like child young. Now, just 2 houses down from Laurie and David, on the same street, lived the Baileys. The Baileys are very, very important to this story. But David, anytime Laurie went off to work, he would head over to the Baileys and they got acquainted real quick. So at the Baileys, you had Ethel Bailey, who was a single parent. She was really struggling to raise 11 children, and she was having to rely on welfare payments to pay for their upbringing. Now, when David Brown had initially approached the family, he had said, "Oh, I've seen that you have like some young daughters. I watched them on their way to school." Red flag. I watched them on their way to school and I'm just wondering if they would want to come over to my house and help me do some cleaning because I have colon cancer and I'm dying. He never had colon cancer. He wasn't dying. He was fine. Ethel Bailey, she didn't really want to let her girls do this, but at the same time she was like, how can I say no to a dying man who's not really dying? And she also said that he seemed really kind and charming, so she felt like she didn't really have much to worry about, and she agreed that the girls could help him clean. Now, of course, David Brown, he had an ulterior motive. He didn't really need help with the cleaning, he just needed access to one of the young daughters. And at first, this would be 16-year-old Pam Bailey. He wanted her, and unfortunately, he would get her. So when Cinnamon was just 4 years old, David Brown, he starts to take Cinnamon over to visit the Baileys. He would introduce Cinnamon to 7-year-old Patty Bailey, another really huge name in this case. Now, he would play games with the girls, and his favourite game to play with the girls was called Cinnamon Kisses. You hear this and it sounds like it could be innocent, and then you remember that his daughter's name is Cinnamon and it involves kisses. It's getting weird. So this game was when he would make Cinnamon and Patty kiss him on the lips, and the test was to see who could kiss him on the lips for the longest before laughing. So it's a paedophile's game, is what it is. And it's like, let's bear in mind here, his new love interest is 16 years old. David Brown is a full grown-ass man wanting a little girl, and now he's kissing inappropriately his daughter and a 7-year-old. Think about it. So David, he would date Pam Bailey for a while, but ultimately he got bored and he focused his attention on another one of the Bailey sisters, and this would be 14-year-old Linda Bailey. 14. Like, this guy is like Leonardo DiCaprio, who doesn't date anyone over 25, but instead David Brown doesn't date anyone over the age of 16 apparently. David knew what he was doing was wrong with Linda because they were sneaking around behind Ethel's back. He knew that he couldn't say anything to Ethel that he was dating her 14-year-old daughter. And then when Linda was 16, she would start to ask a sister-in-law about birth control. And I wonder why. So in 1979, Linda would turn 17 and Big Desperate Dave, he was now 26. And finally, he would ask for Ethel's permission to marry her daughter in Las Vegas. This is, of course, after his divorce to Laurie. And Ethel agrees for this to happen. And like, I don't want to speculate, but this really makes me think that Ethel was aware of what was going on, because if someone comes up to you one day and is like, can I marry your daughter? Would she not be like, oh, this is out of the blue. Like, how do you even know that you like each other? You have never dated. But they have. So it just makes me feel like maybe Ethel knew, which isn't a good look, Ethel. So David and Linda, they remain happily married for a whole 1 month and 24 days before David would send Linda packing. Now, he claimed that she was too immature for him, which, you know, yeah, a 17-year-old is probably going to be a bit immature for a 26-year-old. Like, David, that's what happens when you date literal children. So David, he files for divorce from Linda, and then he briefly marries someone else before then ending that marriage as well. And like I said in the last case, that the guy had more wives than Henry VIII, but I'm starting to think that David has more wives than Henry VIII. So at this point in time, David's computing career is really starting to take off. Like, he was known to be a bit of a tech whiz, especially in the upper class community. So eventually David would start his own data recovery business, which was highly sought after. He had so many customers. He was charging ridiculous prices for no very much, but people were willing to pay. His wage used to be, you know, just over 10k a year, and now it was just under 200,000 a year. He's doing well for himself. And what I think just speaks complete volumes about the kind of person David is. Well, I mean, we already know the kind of person that he is, but just another Jenga block on the tower. He found it hilarious that his ex-wife Brenda, who, bearing in mind, has primary custody of their child, but he found it hilarious that she was still struggling, and she had basically taken all the old furniture from their apartment when they lived together, and she was still having to use all of that. Like, she was really struggling to make ends meet. And it's like, that's the mother of your child. Like, what she makes is going to reflect on your daughter when she's there, because she's going to have to fund her living there. How can you think that's hilarious? So at this point in time, David is, you know, for the first time in his life, single, and he's really missing having a minor on his arm. So he actually winds up going back to Linda Bailey, who devastatingly would welcome him back with open arms, and the pair of them would remarry. Now, David had said to Linda that her younger sister Patty should come to live with them. Now, when Patty went to live with Linda and David, Patty would only be 11 years old. So David had said to Linda that the reason Patty should come to live with them is because David was aware that Patty didn't really get along with her mother, and he wanted her to have a happy childhood. And there would also be later claims added in that one of Patty's brothers had been molesting her from a really young age. So let's talk a little bit more about David, just in case we've not got enough insight into how much of a sick weirdo he is. Now, David, he was actually known to be somewhat of a womanizer. I know, like, look at him. How is he womanising anybody? Well, I was kind of putting two and two together, and I think the reason he was deemed a womanizer was because he had so many girlfriends, but the only women he could get were people underage or vulnerable. So is he really a womanizer or like a childrenizer? He's a childrenizer. Now, David, he was 5'7", which, no hate to any man 5'7", short king, we love it. But he was also really like stumpy looking. Like, everything about him just looked really short. And his clothes that he would buy, I don't know if he had like a magic mirror, because he was buying clothes that were far too small for him, like stretching over his belly and stuff like that, ready to burst at the seams, but that's how he dressed. He always had packets of cigarettes on him. He wore really flashy jewellery. Don't know if he thought he was like Tony Soprano, but hey ho. And like, he was also described as being a really sweaty man. Like, he just looked like a glazed donut at all times, and it's like perspiration station. He really needed deodorant, and I don't think he used any. David was also described as being extremely needy and extremely clingy, which is why he never really seemed to be without a relationship, and honestly truly believe that he could only get children as his girlfriends, can't even call it that because they're literally minors underage, but like, no woman his age had nice things to say about him. I think he was a bit of a creep, he was a bit misogynistic, always making really inappropriate jokes, and like, none of the women that worked with him wanted to be near him. So, you know, I had no chance with a grown woman. So at this point in time, Cinnamon has been going back and forth between her mother's and her father's for years. And things with her mother wasn't really getting any easier, and it's not that they had a bad relationship, it was just that Brenda had an awful lot of stress and she would yell. It would really irritate Cinnamon. She didn't want to have to listen to her mum yelling about stuff again, and I suppose at Cinnamon's young age she's not really going to understand her mother's stress, and then when she goes to her dad's, he's not got any stress because there's no financial difficulty, his bills are paid, he knows where his next meal's coming from, like, he's not worried. So she didn't really understand why her mum was like that, but her dad was so chilled, and you know, this resulted in her preferring to be at her dad's. Now at this point, Brenda, she had actually just had another baby by the name of Penelope, and at this point I would say Cinnamon did start to feel a bit more sorry for her mum. She could see the pressure that she was under, and she did try to be more mindful toward the situation. So whenever things did get a bit rough at her mum's, or she felt like her mum maybe needed some space, she would go over to her dad's and spend time with him, and also her stepmother Linda Bailey, or now Linda Brown. And it's actually said that Cinnamon and Linda, they got along really well. You know, they got on like a house on fire, they had a lot in common, probably because they're not that far apart in age. But they always just had a really nice time together, a laugh, a joke. They seemed to have a really nice relationship. So in the summer of 1984, Linda would give birth to her and David's daughter, and that was Crystal Marie. Now it's worth noting that during Linda's pregnancy with Crystal Marie, she had actually said to David that maybe it would be best if her now 16-year-old little sister Patty, if Patty went back home to live with her mother. But David was so against this. He was like, no, like Patty stays here, she's family, she lives with us. Patty doesn't go anywhere, and we'll find out why. I hope that you cannot hear the music that is blaring from my neighbour. I mean, it is a Saturday and, you know, people have a life outside of filming YouTube videos, but it is blaring loud, so apologies. So just a few months before Cinnamon's 14th birthday, she was still living with Brenda at this point. However, when the school year was about to start, Cinnamon would move in with David and Linda full time, and this would be at their home in Garden Grove. So this home in Garden Grove, it was actually a one-storey home, and it would have a master bedroom, which of course Linda and David would have. Then baby Crystal, she would have another room to herself, and then 16-year-old Patty, she also had a room to herself. Now, Cinnamon, she would be papped in the trailer, in the garden. She didn't sleep in the house, and she would actually spend most of her time when she was at her father's by herself in the trailer in the garden, because the house was overcrowded. Like, there really was not enough room for all these people. Now, a lot of Cinnamon's friends would later say that they felt that Cinnamon didn't really have a life while she was living with David. Her whole life was lived under a microscope. He didn't really want her going outside. She wasn't allowed to socialise with boys, and she wasn't allowed to date boys, obviously. And if David ever, you know, had an idea or thought that she might be dating boys, she would be forced to cut the contact with these boys and then be grounded. Like, David made it his life goal to ensure that he was involved in every single element of Cinnamon's life. She wanted to feel like no one was closer to her than her father, no one could protect her like her father, and that her father was someone that would do anything and everything for her. And David believed that his 14-year-old daughter Cinnamon should feel the exact same way. She should be willing to do anything and everything to protect her father. So come 1985, the Brown family on Garden Grove, they seem to be a really normal, regular, happy family, but as we know, in these cases, that could not be further from the truth. So at this point in the house, we've got 36-year-old David Brown, his wife, 23-year-old Linda Brown, 23. Then we've got 17-year-old Patty Bailey, which is Linda's sister, 14-year-old Cinnamon Brown, and then baby Crystal. Now, over the course of 2 years, David, he had been confiding in both Patty and Cinnamon that Linda, Patty's sister, Cinnamon's stepmother, she was plotting to kill him. Now, David claimed that Linda wanted to murder him so she could take his insurance money and also his businesses and run away with them. Like, unless his business was on wheels, I don't think she'll get very far. Now, at first, Cinnamon kind of laughs in her dad's face. Like, he's somebody that's known for very inappropriate humour, and she did not believe for a second that this was true until his face was, like, pinned straight. Like, Cinnamon, I'm being serious, I am scared. But David, he would claim that he had even heard Linda on the phone with her twin brother plotting his murder. Now, if someone was plotting your murder, I get the feeling that they would be a bit more careful than to have the conversation in front of you. That's just me. So David, he starts telling his daughter and his sister-in-law that he feels the only way that he can really be saved is if Linda is murdered first. Instead of calling the police and telling them that you've heard your wife plotting your murder, the easiest thing to do is get rid of her first. Okay. Also, it might look like I'm putting a lot of this on, but it's only a tinted moisturiser, so it's really not. So at this point, David's like, yeah, you know, Linda, she's got to go. But he says, I really just don't have the stomach to do this. Like, there's no way that I would be able to kill my wife. I just don't have it in me. So he's kind of sitting and, you know, brainstorming, I suppose, with Cinnamon and Patty. And he's like, who could kill her? Who could I get to kill her? And he's like proper side-eyeing Cinnamon, right? He's like hoping that Cinnamon's going to take the bait and be like, I'll do it. So at this point, David feels like Cinnamon isn't really getting the hint. So he looks at her and he says, you know, if you loved me, you would do this for me. Like, you would save my life. I would do this for you. You should be doing this for me. Guilt-tripping his 14-year-old daughter. Now, he did also try and promise Cinnamon that, you know, if she did this, it would be no big deal. Like, yeah, okay, the police would take her away initially, but they would just give her psychiatric treatment and then she'd be home, like, the next day. No big deal. Like, Linda's dead, but she'll be fine. David then also said to his 14-year-old daughter, you know, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to have to leave town forever and you will never ever see me again. Is that really what you want? Do you just not want to see me? So soon after, David holds a brainstorming session with Patty and Cinnamon, and they are discussing the different ways of which they might be able to murder Linda. One suggests, you know, let's get her when she's in the bath, throw a toaster in the bath with her, like live, laugh, toaster bath. They're like, that's not really going to work. Another one suggests throwing her out of a vehicle whilst it's going down the highway, so, you know, throw her out when they're driving fast and then a truck might run over her. And someone else gives like a really basic suggestion of hitting her over the head with something really heavy. David at one point even suggests throwing Linda off of a cliff, but none of them were kind of giving what he wanted it to give. And Cinnamon at this point, she's just feeling horrified at this. Like, she doesn't want to kill Linda. She doesn't want to believe Linda would ever want to hurt her dad either. Her and Linda have this really close happy relationship, and she just doesn't see a world where Linda would ever ruin that or try and take Cinnamon's father away from her. So Cinnamon, she's just feeling really uneasy about the whole thing, and she feels like she needs someone to confide in. So she goes to speak to Patty about her feelings toward Linda and the fact that she doesn't want to kill her. And surprisingly, Patty, she's annoyed that Cinnamon says this. Like, she wants Linda dead as well. And when Cinnamon said, like, I just don't believe that Linda would be capable of killing anyone, Patty said, she's my sister. I know my sister. I know who she is. As if, like, no, I know her better, and she would kill. So she never really got, like, the support that she needed from Patty, obviously. So she decides, you know what, I'm just going to have to go and talk to my dad about this and tell him how I'm feeling. So she goes to talk to David about this, and she says, you know, I just don't think I'm up to this. I don't have the stomach to kill my stepmother, who I love and care about. Then desperate Dave pipes up again, right? He's not happy hearing this because it's really, you know, putting a crimp in his plans. So he says to Cinnamon, you know, if you love me, you will trust me and you will believe what I say because I'm your father and I know best. And of course, Cinnamon's like, well, yeah, like, my dad does know best, but this just feels wrong. So she still feels very, very conflicted. So yet again, Cinnamon's feeling really guilty because she feels like she's going against her dad by not wanting to kill her stepmom. And she tries to talk to Patty again about it just to, you know, try and see reason with her. But anytime Cinnamon would talk to Patty, Patty would get raging. And she even said to Cinnamon at one point, like, you can't love your dad that much if you're not willing to kill for him. Like, if you really loved your dad, you would do this for him. But instead, you're quite happy to see him in danger. Again, making Cinnamon feel so bad and feel like she's the one that's doing something wrong by not killing Linda. And honestly, at this point, like, no one's even thinking, like, it's been 2 years that we've been getting told that Linda's going to kill Dad. He's still here. She's not made any moves. Like, can we not just forget about it? Like, maybe Linda changed her mind. Now, you might be wondering, why is Patty, Linda's own sister, so desperate for her to be killed? Now, would it shock you if I told you that David and Patty, they were in a relationship together? 36-year-old desperate Dave and 17-year-old Patty Bailey were in a relationship. And Patty believed that Linda was the block that was preventing her from being with David and being able to marry David. Now, when I first was going through this, I kind of lost sight of what happened between Patty and David. And of course, when she moved into their house full-time at the age of 11, David had been sexually abusing her from that age. He was grooming her and abusing her on the daily. And Patty believed that David done this because he truly loved her and wanted to be with her. And Patty even said later on that as she got older, she just started to believe that these kind of relationships were normal and that he really was doing what he was doing because he truly loved her. And to be honest, David had really started to work on Patty from her very young age of 11, trying to fill her head with lies about Linda to make her turn against Linda and almost live in fear of her. So at this point, David thinks that, you know, he's got everyone brainwashed enough and now his plan can be in full swing. So he starts to take out life insurance policies on Linda, and he took out 2 policies, and the last one was taken out just 2 months before her murder. Now, these policies, they would amount to $842,793. So literally just under $1 million. So just after midnight on March the 19th of 1985, David would abruptly wake up both Patty and Cinnamon from their sleep and say, girls, it has to be done tonight. Now, at this point, he has his eyes on the prize, his plan is in motion, and he would hand Cinnamon Brown a gun. Now, as well as the gun, he also handed Cinnamon like this cocktail of pills that he had put together, and he also helped her draft up a suicide note in the months prior because he thought it looked better for Cinnamon if it was a murder-suicide. Then, you know, courts and the prison system would be far more lenient on her. So David's now like, right, okay, the plan is in full swing, so I'm going to do my bit of the plan. get out the house, get myself an alibi. So he would go out to like a local convenience store and he made himself known. Like he made sure that that clerk seen him and knew that he was there. Now David, he would later claim to the police that the reason he went out of the house at that time was to escape Linda and Cinnamon, who were apparently in this heated argument. Were they arguing in their sleep, David? Now whilst David is getting his alibi all sorted out, back home, Patty was holding on to baby Crystal, and then Cinnamon, she was standing over her sleeping stepmother with the gun. Now, Cinnamon, she had taken a pillow to muffle the gunshots, and she would fire one single shot into Linda's abdomen, and just as Linda lets out like this whimper of pain, her baby starts to cry. And it's almost like the baby knew what was happening to her mum. And I know people will say like, well, the baby clearly got a fright because it was like this big loud noise. But it was just as Linda whimpered, baby Crystal started to cry. And like, I don't know, I think that's a lot deeper than the baby getting a fright, but that might just be me. And then as instructed by her dad, Cinnamon would shoot Linda for a second time, and it said that this would have been the fatal shot that would kill her. So a while later, a call would be made to the police in Garden Grove, and this call would come from David Brown. Now, David Brown would cry down the phone very fakely, explaining that he's come home and he's found his wife dead in their bed and he thinks she's been shot. What do you mean you think? There's gunshot wounds. Tell me why you think. So both police and ambulance, they arrive on the scene, and Linda, she is rushed to Fountain Valley Community Hospital. But unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the paramedics, Linda would die shortly after arriving. Now, it's said that it was a few hours later, but I'm not entirely sure just how long it was because sources state different things. But Cinnamon Brown would be found out in the backyard behind a doghouse. Now, when she was found by police, she was shaken, she was laying in a pool of her own vomit and urine, and she had like a ribbon-tied suicide note in her hand. So at this point, it's obviously evident to the police that she's taken an overdose of prescription medication, and when they read the note that she had in her hand, it said, "Dear God, please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt her." Now, detectives had actually stated if Cinnamon Brown had not vomited up these pills, the amount that she had been given, or at this point they think she's just taken it herself without any influence, the amount that she had taken would have been enough to kill her had she not vomited. And I have to wonder, did David Brown know this? Did he give her that much hoping that it would kill her and then she would never be able to come clean about the events of that evening? I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past him. He did just have his own wife killed. So of course, because the police have found Cinnamon with the suicide note and basically admitting to the murder, she was arrested and she confessed right away. Now, Cinnamon, she would of course be ordered to stand trial. She would plead not guilty by reason of insanity, which was kind of the plan all along, with her dad, I believe. Now, the Deputy District Attorney, Mike McGuire, he had claimed that Cinnamon had murdered Linda in cold blood. He tried to say that Cinnamon had carried out this murder because she was depressed, she was angry with Linda because apparently Linda wanted to throw her out the house. And to Cinnamon's complete shock, her own father, David Brown, would testify against her in the trial. Now, he had said that Cinnamon had been extremely moody and extremely angry on the lead up to the night of the murder. And he said that he had been very, very concerned about his daughter's well-being, her mental health, and he was worried that she might commit suicide. But you weren't worried enough to get her help, David. You think she's going to commit suicide, but you didn't get her any help. Make that make sense. And David, he also claimed that he had taught Cinnamon how to shoot a gun the very night before Linda's murder. And it's like, you gave an apparently suicidal young girl a lesson on how to fire a gun when she is expressing that she doesn't want to live anymore. Make that one make sense, you complete idiot. Now, Cinnamon, she would be convicted of first-degree murder, and when she heard the guilty verdict, she looked completely shocked and she was stunned, and she actually said, I don't understand. Like, how's this happened? And the reason she was so shocked is because her father, the man that she trusted, the man that she killed for, promised her that everything would be okay. And it wouldn't be. Now, Cinnamon's grandmother, she would testify on Cinnamon's behalf and said that Cinnamon had imaginary friends, and I think that's a lie. But her mum Brenda, she had testified to say that the week prior to the murders, Cinnamon had called her and said that she felt like she was going crazy being in that house because everyone was constantly arguing. And honestly, I kind of just want to say to the grandmother, the only bloody voices and imaginary friends that Cinnamon was hearing and seeing was the voice of your son, David Brown. Now, ultimately, Cinnamon Brown would be sentenced to 27 years in prison. Now, because of her age of 14 and a half at that very time, she would be housed with the California Youth Authority. Now, Cinnamon's mother, Brenda, she expressed that she just did not believe for a second that Cinnamon would do this or even think about doing it, and she just wouldn't be capable of doing something like this on her own. She felt like there was a lot of things being overlooked and that there was just far too many unanswered questions. She was really confused because Cinnamon's always been a very nice, very kind, very polite girl that would do anything for anyone. But this would have been her downfall in this case. And although Cinnamon would be convicted, investigators weren't completely satisfied that they've got all of the truth, so they wanted to keep looking into this. So after Linda's death, David, he had cashed in the 2 life insurance policies that he had taken out shortly before Linda's murder. Now with this, he was able to buy himself a very nice house in Anaheim Hills, and he also bought himself a few fancy cars. Would it surprise you if I told you that Patty Bailey was also living in that house? She was right there next to David. Now, the pair had secretly married in 1986, and just 1 year later, they had a daughter together. Now, whilst incarcerated, Cinnamon was really starting to see her father's true colours, and she was becoming disillusioned by him. She was just not under his spell anymore, and he kept letting her down. He would claim that he was going to go visit her and then he just wouldn't turn up, and she was left waiting, wondering where he was. And she felt like at this point she's given up her life for someone who does not give a tiny rat's ass about hers. So at this point, Cinnamon's getting ticked off, and rightly so. Her clams are steamed. And she was now telling the police that the only reason she committed this murder was because her father practically begged and manipulated her into doing this. She also put Patty right in it. She said that Patty was equally as culpable, if not more so. She was desperate for her sister to be killed. Now, soon enough, Cinnamon would learn about the insurance policies, the marriage and child to Patty, and the fact that they had this relationship and they were off living this nice happy life together while Cinnamon was rotting in prison. So Cinnamon, she decides that she's going to start working with the DA to really bring to light the true facts. So in August of 1988, Cinnamon, she would start to wear a wire for the very few visits that her father would attend to come and see her. And it wouldn't take very long before David Brown heavily incriminated himself in this murder. He admitted on this wiretapped visit that he had concocted the cocktail of pills and everything that night for Cinnamon to take. In another instance, he also claimed that he could never tell the real truth about the murders because he couldn't survive in prison. Prison wasn't for him. He wouldn't do well. But your 14-year-old daughter at the time was going to be fine in prison. He said there was just no way that he would be able to survive in prison. He felt like he would be a target, and yeah, I hope so. So David says to Cinnamon, listen, I can't come forward. I can't confess. But what I will do is I'll tell Patty that she needs to confess. So we'll get Patty put in prison, and then you, Cinnamon, you can come live with me. Your dad, your best friend. So Patty and David, they would be arrested just a couple of weeks later, and immediately David is denying any involvement and any knowledge of a plot for Linda's murder. The story will change very, very quickly when he realises that his conversations with Cinnamon had been recorded. And at this moment, he turns on both Patty and Cinnamon. The man is not loyal. These hoes ain't loyal. And Patty's like, if you're going to throw me under the bus, I am gonna roll you under that bus, my friend. She would testify against David at his trial. Now, whilst David's been held at Orange County Jail prior to his trial taking place, David was still up to his old tricks, and he had made like an offer or tried to make a deal with a soon-to-be released inmate by the name of Richard Steinhardt. He offered him up to $500,000 to kill Patty, and not only Patty, he also wanted 2 of the DAs dead. Now, David fully believed that this would delay his trial and also make him look like more of a victim because his other wife has just been murdered. Like, does he not realise this just looked really suspicious? Like, quite clearly, you're going to have something to do with that. Now, Steinhardt, he's no stupid. This ain't his first rodeo. He would meet with the prosecution for David's trial and he confirmed to them what David had requested him to do. So he's working with them as well. So he decides that he'll work with them and he's going to tape a conversation with David. So Steinhardt calls David and falsely tells him that he has committed the murders. Patty and the 2 DAs, they're gone, they're dead, they're all finished. David replies by saying, "Wonderful, you're such a good man." Now, during David's trial in 1990, Cinnamon and Patty would both testify against David. They concluded that he was the mastermind behind this plot to kill Linda Brown, and he would be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And David Brown, he wound up dying in prison in 2014. I didn't really look into why he died because I don't really care, but he died. And I just hope that, you know, maybe at some point he got roughed up a little bit. Now, Patty, however, she wasn't out of the woods just yet. She also had her own trial. Patty's case would be heard in juvenile court because she was 17 at the times that the murders were committed, and she was sentenced to a reformatory. Now, Cinnamon Brown, she would have served 7 years in prison. Whilst in prison, she earned her high school diploma. She also got herself an Associate of Arts degree as well. She would then be paroled in 1992. Now, Cinnamon had claimed at her trial that it was her devotion and her loyalty and love for her father that made her commit this crime. She would have done anything for him. Now, Cinnamon actually said, "I loved him. I didn't want to lose my father. Why would he tell me to do something that wasn't all right?" Because he's evil, Cinnamon. Your dad is a POS. But Cinnamon Brown, I mean, out in 1992, she still had, you know, most of her life left to live, and from what I can see, she's never been in trouble since, and she showed a great deal of remorse throughout her trial, throughout her time in prison. I just don't know what to think about Cinnamon and Patty because I do feel like they were both groomed from such a young age, and I imagine it would have been pretty easy to brainwash them because of the way that David has treated them since they were children. And it's like Patty could back up the claims that Cinnamon really did not want to kill her stepmother. You know, she loved her stepmother, and you know, I can only imagine the guilt that she lives with every single day. But of course, she did commit murder. Patty was culpable of the same crime, minus the fact that she didn't kill her, but she had plotted to kill her, and they both deserved to serve jail time. Do I think 7 years for murder is enough? Absolutely not, but given the circumstances, maybe. I feel like these 2 young girls were just completely brainwashed. I really, really do. I mean, Cinnamon was 14. I cannot wait to hear what you guys think and feel in the comments, but I would really like to know how you perceive this case and how you perceive the sentences that were handed to Patty and also to Cinnamon. Alyssa Bustamante, who is just evil beyond words. That is the only thing I can say. She brutally murdered a 9-year-old girl, and this 9-year-old girl, Elizabeth Alton, was someone who trusted Alyssa. She thought Alyssa was a friend, and she wasn't. Alyssa Bustamante, on the outside looking in, she seemed like a somewhat normal teenager. She was quite rebellious, but a lot of teenagers are. Her friends described her as amazing and sweet and someone who was loved by everyone. But underneath all that, the real Alyssa had these deep and dark fantasies that we couldn't even imagine. They would not even be able to fathom the monster that was lurking beneath the surface until October the 21st of 2009, where she would brutally take the life of 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten. Before we get into it, please make sure you are subscribed, notification bell on. I post 2 times per week, Wednesdays and Sundays without fail. Apart from that Sunday there, but like I'm hoping that doesn't count because I was unwell. But any other time, I'm here for you. Yeah. But without any further rambling or any further ado, let's get into the case of Alyssa Bustamante. I honestly just have to say, like, before we get into this, first of all, Egghead is back because my hair is so greasy, it's not been washed in a week. It's cases like the one we're covering today that really just steam my clams to another degree, because why is it that when young people commit some of the worst, horrific, murderous acts in the world that we could ever imagine, people always try and defend them because of their age? And I'm not being funny. If you can commit an adult crime, you should face adult time. Get that on, what's it called? Like a plank. No, not a plank. A plaque. Get that on a plaque, because that's so true. Like, I'm just so sick and tired of hearing like, oh, but they were only 14. Oh, they were only 15. I don't care. I don't care. If you can commit the crime, you can do the time. So Alyssa Deline Bustamante, she was born on January the 28th of 1994, and she was born in Cole, Missouri. And in 2002, Alyssa's grandparents, they decided to take legal custody of Alyssa and her 3 siblings due to the instability that Alyssa and her siblings were facing in their home life. It was a really, really tough environment that they were being brought up in. So, for example, Alyssa's mother, Michelle Bustamante, she had a long history of drug addiction and alcohol abuse that had led to multiple criminal charges and also jail time. And if anyone out there has had a family member that has struggled with addiction, then you know the toll that it takes, not just on that person, but the family as a whole. And also when there's children involved, that just adds a completely different spanner in the works. It can be such a horrific environment, and it's certainly not a stable one to raise a child. And of course, because of her drug addiction and her alcohol addiction, she was deemed to be an unfit parent who could not care for her children in the way that they needed. Now, her father, Cesar Bustamante, he was currently serving time in prison for assault charges as well. I couldn't really get details on the assault that he committed, but all I know is that he was serving time at the time when the grandparents took legal custody. And like, the reason that Alyssa's grandparents stepped up is they believed that they could offer her a supportive, loving, caring environment, a stable environment, and that they could have a good life. And that was their aim. They wanted Alyssa and her siblings to be raised in a loving environment so they could make the most of their childhood. So Alyssa's grandparents, they have legal custody of her and her siblings, and the grandparents decide, like, these kids need a fresh start, so we're going to move them to a more rural area. So Alyssa and her 3 siblings, they moved to this rural ranch style kind of area in St. Martin's of Missouri. But listen, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Alyssa had a troubled childhood, okay? Of course, she absolutely did. The things that she's witnessed and been through, no child should have to see or go through. But her grandparents, when they took Alyssa and her 3 siblings in, they did everything in their power to provide a stable, loving and supportive environment to every single one of them. And by all appearances, Alyssa seemed to be pretty normal as a child, right? Fair enough, she was a bit rebellious, but I'm sure we can all relate to being a bit rebellious at some point, especially in the teenage years. Sorry, mum and dad. But like, there was nothing that alarming to start off with for Alyssa. I mean, at school, she was excelling academically, doing amazing. She was an A and B student. She was known for writing poetry and always being with her friends and making them laugh until they cried. She was also quite a dedicated member of her church. She would attend the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she was a really active member. She would participate in loads of the youth activities that the church had to offer. Again, like, the girl seems stable, she seems normal. She seems to have stuff together as much as she can at this age. Now, it would be in Alyssa's early teen years where her dark side, and believe me, she has a dark side, her dark side would really start to emerge, as well as her mental health struggles. And again, there is no denying that she really did struggle with her mental health, but nothing will ever excuse the crimes that this girl committed. Devastatingly, in 2007, Alyssa, she would try to kill herself. She tried to commit suicide, and this was something that she would attempt multiple times. So again, yes, okay, she is absolutely struggling in a way that no one should have to experience. And she would be committed to a hospital for 10 days. This was a psychiatric hospital. And while she was here, the staff were, you know, doing their best to try and stabilise her to a point where she could be released. But what can you really do in 10 days when it comes to mental health and someone that has tried to take their own life? So Alyssa, she would be put on antidepressants to try and treat her depression and her anxiety and just try and get everything under control a bit for her. While she was going through treatment and even while she was on her antidepressants, she was still practicing self-harm. I mean, she was frequently cutting herself, and not only would she cut herself, but she would want to show her friends all of her scars. Some friends had even said that they believed that Alyssa was enjoying the worry that she was causing to both her friends and her family. And her friends stated, I just want to make it clear, her friends stated, I'm not stating this, but her friends even stated that they felt like Alyssa was showing her scars to show off, and she seemed to be quite proud to be on antidepressants as well. Now, a friend had even said that it was very, very obvious that Alyssa was on antidepressants because she made no secret of it. Her friends would go over to her house with her. The first thing that Alyssa would say when they were in her bedroom is, oh wait, I have to take my medication for my depression and anxiety. They said that she said it like that. It was very much like wanting to announce it to the world. Let me just say right now, I am not saying that she's showing off. I am just simply stating what her friends are saying, what they said she acted like. I myself am on antidepressants. It's nothing to laugh about. It is no joke. It's no picnic. I would never say, yeah, I'm not trying to be offensive. Despite her struggles with her mental health, by all accounts, Alyssa seemed like she was a pretty normal kid. You know, I mean, to people who knew her, she was kind, she was outgoing, she loved spending time with her friends, and most of the time she was quite happy. But online, this is a whole different girl that we're dealing with. This girl, her fantasies go darker than dark. It's bad. Now, I think we see this in a lot of cases where they have access to the internet and they don't use it for any good reason, these people, okay? So Alyssa's access to the internet, that was just allowing her to delve even deeper into her deepest and darkest fantasies that she had. And even worse, it allowed her to openly express them to the world. So in particular, Alyssa, she loved a bit of Twitter, right? Known as X now. I don't have Twitter, right? It's never something that's really interested me, but Alyssa loved a wee tweet. She was always putting out tweets, and she would love to express just how much she hated authority. And one of her tweets even said, bad decisions make great stories. And like, honestly, this whole like bad decisions make great stories could just be seen as Alyssa trying to be a quirky, cool teenager. Like, we've all been there. When I was a teenager, I loved to watch Skins. Effie Stoneham wanted to be her so bad, and I look at it now and I'm like, that is alarming. Why would you want to be like Effie Stoneham? But it's like, you want to be cool as a teenager. At that point, Effie Stoneham was my jam, and like, I would post things on Facebook being like, here for a good time, not a long time. And it's literally a Friday night, I'm in my bed drinking an Nesquik milkshake, minding my business. Like, Anna, calm down. Like, we all did it as teenagers. And if you were raised watching Skins, I know you can relate. I know it. And whilst we, you know, normal people who grow out of that phase, we move on and realise that that's not the way to go. However, it would show over time that Alyssa wasn't trying to be a rebellious, cool teen. She was just, in fact, very deeply disturbed. Now, Alyssa, she was a YouTuber back in the day. I mean, a really small YouTuber, like even smaller than me. But she had a YouTube channel and she would also post on MySpace. She had her hobbies listed as cutting and killing people. What can I tell you? I need to ask, right, because I felt like this was a fever dream. I knew that I had seen this video before. Do you remember years ago there was a video that went like viral on the internet, and it was this young girl trying to get two boys to touch an electrified fence? That was Alyssa. That was Alyssa. She was trying to get her brothers to touch an electrified fence in the hopes that it would either severely injure them or kill them. And she was going to post it on YouTube. I mean, she did. But like, I knew I had seen that video, but I had no idea that it was Alyssa who was behind this. Now, I'm sure we can all sit here in complete agreement that the hobbies and interests of Alyssa Bustamante is beyond concerning. Deeply concerning, actually. But no one would know just how dark and terrifying this young girl actually was until October the 21st of 2009. Now, before I get into the horrific and monstrous acts that Alyssa committed, I do just want to take a moment to talk about the victim of today's case, and that is 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten, a beautiful little girl who would have her life stolen from her in the most horrific way. So Elizabeth Olten, she was born on December the 15th of 1999 in Jefferson City, Missouri, and she was a daughter of Patricia, also known as Patty Carwile. Now, her father was Dale Olten Sr., but I do believe that Patty and Dale, they must have split up at some point because there is reference to Elizabeth's stepfather as we get further into the case, but I couldn't really see anything regarding the split. But I believe it would have been an amicable split because they seemed to maintain a really healthy relationship. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, and all of her older siblings were said to have been so protective over her. Like, she was like the little precious one because she was so young, and they just felt it was their duty as the older siblings to look after her and care for her. Now, Elizabeth, she had a very, very good childhood. She had a really happy childhood, in fact. She came from such a loving and supportive family, and she enjoyed spending time with her family so much. Like, usually children, they all want to get out and play with their friends. Elizabeth was just so happy to be around her family. Now, Elizabeth, she loved animals, especially dogs. She was obsessed with dogs. She also liked to play dress up, which I can totally relate. I loved playing dress up when I was a child, so me and Elizabeth, I think we would have been great friends. She also loved to bake cookies. She loved watching Hannah Montana, and she enjoyed listening to Taylor Swift. I was born in 1998, but I genuinely feel anyone born on or around this time, we all had the same childhood. Like, I swear. And for being 9 years old, she was popular. Like, she had quite a lot of friends. But tragically, this group of friends would involve Alyssa Bustamante and also her younger siblings. Now, bearing in mind, Alyssa is 15 years old and Elizabeth is only 9. And I'm not trying to say that's weird, like the age difference, because I know when you're in a neighbourhood and there's like children close by, you are going to make friends who are older and younger, because especially at Elizabeth's age, when she's 9 years old, she's not going to get to travel very far, so her friends will probably be the ones in the street. That just happened to include Alyssa, more so because Elizabeth was friends with Alyssa's younger sister, Emma. Now, it was also really easy for Elizabeth to hang out with Alyssa and her siblings because they lived 4 doors down from each other, so it couldn't have been more perfect. And now, devastatingly, we will be talking about the evening of the 21st of October 2009, where 9-year-old Elizabeth would meet a very, very brutal end. So on that fateful evening, Alyssa would have her 6-year-old little sister Emma ring Elizabeth's doorbell and ask Elizabeth if she would come out to play. This was around 5 p.m. and it is getting close to dinner time, but Elizabeth, she's happy, her friend Emma is at the door for her, she really wants to go out and play. She's begging with her mum Patricia to allow her to go out and play for a little while, and Patricia, like many parents, caves in and she says that Elizabeth can go out and play with Emma for an hour, but there is the condition that she must be back by 6 o'clock. That's when it's going to start to get a bit darker. I mean, it is October, and is also when her dinner's going to be ready. And I do have to say as well, Patricia wouldn't have had any suspicions of young Emma coming to the door because it wasn't unusual or strange for Emma to call on Elizabeth because they were friends. So Elizabeth and Emma, they agree to the condition that Elizabeth will be home by 6 p.m. and off they went. And despite Elizabeth making this promise to her mum that she would be back by 6 p.m, Elizabeth would never make it home and her mother would never see her daughter alive again. Shortly after Elizabeth went out to play with Emma, she would be lured to the woods by Emma where she would meet Alyssa. Now, Alyssa would lure her deeper into the woods and she claimed that she was doing this because she had a surprise for Emma, and of course she didn't. And you know what makes me so furiously angry within this case? I mean, all of it does, but it's the fact that Elizabeth trusted. She trusted Emma, she trusted Alyssa, and of course she trusted Alyssa because Alyssa was older. It was someone who she thought would take care of her. So when they're luring her into the woods, she's not thinking anything of it. She's not scared, she's not worried. She doesn't feel like she's in danger because in her mind, she's with two friends. And she just had no idea the fate, the horrific fate that would lie ahead of her. Now, once they arrived at the location of this surprise, Alyssa would attack 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton. She started off by strangling Elizabeth before then proceeding to slit her throat and stab her repeatedly, 8 times to be specific, stabbed her to death. This 9-year-old little girl who thought she was just out to play with her friends. Now, after Alyssa had brutally murdered this beautiful little girl, she then proceeded to bury Elizabeth's body in a shallow grave in the woods that is nearby their home, by the way. Alyssa had actually dug this ahead of time, which is clear premeditation. This was not just something she did in the heat of the moment. This is something this evil little scumbag has been planning and thinking about for a long, long time. It's not heat of the moment, it's not spur of the moment, it's not a mental break or a snap. She has thought about this and planned it and then executed that plan. And I do not care that she is 15 in this case. I do not care. She's a monster, she's evil, and if I'm honest, she should have been given the death penalty. Now, of course, 6 p.m. comes and goes, and Elizabeth's mother, Patricia, is immediately worried when Elizabeth isn't home. Now, remember how I was saying those siblings of Elizabeth's, they felt it was their duty to protect her. Well, her 13-year-old brother, Anthony, he would go out immediately and search for Elizabeth. At 13, he is just a child himself, but still he feels it's his duty as her big brother to go out there and look for her. And chillingly, he would find Alyssa and Emma, and when he encountered Alyssa and Emma, he heard Alyssa whisper to Emma, "Don't tell anyone." We all know what they were talking about, but Anthony wouldn't at this point. Now, I will say it was more so when it got dark outside that the Alton family really started to worry about their precious little girl, and they thought that something sinister might have happened to her at this point. Something that we should know about Elizabeth is that she's terrified from the dark. She would never, ever, ever stay out in the dark because she's petrified. She would always be home before it got dark, and she would never stay out past 6, and she would always listen to what her mum tells her to do, and that was to be home by 6. And the thing that seemed to trouble Patricia the most was the fact that Elizabeth was no longer with Emma. So where did she go? Like, does Emma know where Elizabeth went? Did she go away with someone? Now, Elizabeth's mother, Patricia, she made the very quick decision to get in contact with the police, report her 9-year-old daughter missing, and amazingly, police, they got right on the case. They were as concerned as Patricia was about Elizabeth's safety. Now, they learned at the time of her disappearance, she had a cell phone on her, so immediately they went to get an emergency ping from AT&T, who was the cell phone provider, and this would give them an estimated location of the phone. Now, this trace that they did, it would show that the last ping of Elizabeth's phone would be in the woods that was nearby to Elizabeth's neighbourhood. Now, the Olton family at this point, they are out searching high and low for their daughter. They would be joined by hundreds of locals who just wanted to help find 9-year-old Elizabeth. Now, the FBI, they also arrived to assist on the search for 9-year-old Elizabeth. Now, because the FBI had turned up, many of the locals had believed that Elizabeth had possibly been abducted by a local sex offender or possibly by a predator who was passing through the town. However, the authorities, they would speak with 6-year-old Emma, who they believed was the last person to see Elizabeth before she disappeared. And when they had spoken with Emma, Emma had obviously revealed that her 15-year-old sister Alyssa was also with them at the time. Now, once the FBI had gathered this information from 6-year-old Emma, they very quickly started to put the pieces together of what had really happened to 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton. Now, the day after Elizabeth's disappearance, the FBI, they would question Alyssa Bustamante. Now, when they began to question Alyssa, they could tell right away something was off with this girl. Something evil was going on with this girl. So the FBI, they start off by questioning Alyssa on a shallow hole that they had found dug near her house. This was also near the woods. So this hole in particular was empty, but it was a shallow grave type of hole. And Alyssa responded and just said, "Oh, I just really enjoy digging holes. It's a real hobby, you know, holes, can't get enough of them." And I just realised how that sounded. Oops. But she said that she would dig holes for fun. Now, Alyssa is acting all dodgy, all weird, right? And the FBI, they are not buying her story whatsoever. Thankfully, hallelujah, at least we have some good police work going on here. They are so sus of Alyssa that they decide to obtain a search warrant for her home. And with this search warrant, it would not be long before they discovered Alyssa's deepest and darkest secrets, and also what she did to Elizabeth. Now listen, Alyssa's bedroom on the whole was creepy. Weird vibes all around. She had really disturbing pictures, she had really disturbing pieces of writing that she had done by herself, but one of the nails in her coffin, that would be her social media accounts. You know, when she's listed her hobbies and interests as killing people. It's going to look suspicious. And that is where they would get a real peek behind the curtain of just who Alyssa Bustamante was. Now, while she's got a nail in the coffin already, the final nail in the coffin, the nail that would send her down, would be her own diary. That's right. Yeah, she kept a journal and she was, recounting the events of the day. She happened to recount the events of October the 21st, 2009. Now, Alyssa, obviously thinking she was dead sneaky, she had tried to scribble out this entry in ink, but she didn't do a very good job and the police were still able to read it. I am going to read the horrific notes from her diary right now regarding the murder of a 9-year-old little girl. "I just effing killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how I feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. Lol." How, I can never understand how these kind of monsters exist, how someone can get enjoyment in writing something like that and then saying that she's going to church now. Lol, LOL. Yeah, it's a laughing matter, hun. And it's the fact is she just thinks she's so slick when she's not. Honestly, let's see if she will be so slick when she's in hell getting pulled apart by demons, because that's where she's going. Elevator down to hell. And also, not to be a bitch unreasonably, but for being an A and B student, she cannot spell. She spelled amazing with an H. AHMAZING. And then when she wrote oh my god, there was no spaces. There was no spaces between the letters. It was oh my and then gawd. GAWD. It's not about her spelling right, but I'm just saying we need to slag her off. So at this point, the evidence against Alyssa is just piling up like a Jenga tower, right? It's not getting any better for her. And the pressure that she's feeling from the questioning by the FBI, she finally cracks and she would admit to the brutal murder of 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton. And just 2 days, this is all it took to find Elizabeth, just 2 days after her disappearance, Alyssa would lead the detectives, investigators, FBI to the shallow grave where the body of Elizabeth Alton had been buried. Now, this grave had been covered with leaves. She was trying to hide where Elizabeth had been buried. Ultimately, she did a really bad job. Like, if they had come across that before, I'm sure they would have knew to look there. But Alyssa would be arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Now, of course, the news of the horrific murder of 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, this completely shocked and destroyed the community. They could not believe that this innocent, precious 9-year-old girl had fallen victim to a teenager, a literal child, a teenager who was so evil and who Elizabeth had believed was her friend and who she had trusted. They were just devastated. I mean, who can you really trust then with your children if you can't even trust other children? Now, even Alyssa's own friends were completely blindsided by the horrific acts that she was capable of and that she had committed. And one of her friends had said that this just isn't her, like this really isn't the Alyssa that she knows. And she just couldn't believe that Alyssa had done this. Now, Alyssa Bustamante, she would admit in court that she did in fact murder Elizabeth Alton. She had admitted to strangling Elizabeth and then slitting her throat and then proceeding to stab her until she knew she was dead. She had then went on to admit that she did in fact bury Elizabeth's body in the shallow grave, and she did confirm that she had dug that grave a lot earlier and that the murder was planned. Now, because Alyssa was just 15 years old, her defence attorney was going to try and use this as a way to get leniency applied to her sentence. Thankfully, the judge had a brain and a heart for Elizabeth Alton and would not go lenient. She would be tried as an adult. Her defence had even tried to say that her troubled childhood was the catalyst for her murderous tendencies, and I honestly just think that that is a slap in the face to Alyssa's grandparents who have tried their bloody best to raise her and give her a good, stable home. What a slap in the face. Like, her troubled childhood, fair enough, it was difficult, it was hard, I am not disputing that, and she has definitely been through things that children shouldn't go through. But I know people who have been through the exact same sort of situation as Alyssa, and they're good people. They don't kill because they've had it rough. They actually make a better life for themselves. So, yeah, no buying it, hun. And it is honestly cases like this where I'm like, how can these defence attorneys defend someone like that? I couldn't. And like, I know they say everyone deserves a fair trial. Do they really though? Everyone deserves a good defence. Do they really though? Like, I just don't agree. I say if someone commits a crime like this, we throw them in the court and allow them to try and defend themselves with no practice. But just a few weeks before Alyssa's trial was set to begin in 2012, Alyssa had ended up deciding that she was going to accept a plea deal for a lesser sentence. She would only be convicted of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. Now, by her taking this plea deal, it meant that she was able to avoid the death penalty. Of course. It always seems to work like this. It always seems to work in their favour. They get off somehow. Now, another part of this plea that just boils my blood was the fact that it would possibly give her the opportunity to be let out of prison after 30 years on parole. Now, of course, Elizabeth's mother, Patricia, she was absolutely horrified at the outcome of this trial, and she was not satisfied with the sentence that was given to Alyssa. Like, how could that sentence be justice for her baby girl? It just wasn't. Now, Patricia had stated the reason that the DA had made a plea was because they were fearful that Alyssa, if she was put in front of a jury, she might walk free like Casey Anthony. They're bringing Casey Anthony in it, and I hate that woman. Oh my god, I could rant about Casey Anthony. But she's so overly covered that like I don't really see a point. But if you wanted to see me cover Casey Anthony, please let me know and I will do it if you want to see it. But I totally get what Patricia's saying. Because of Alyssa's age when she committed the crime, I can understand Patricia being fearful that due to this a jury would be like, oh well, she was only 15 when she committed it, she didn't know any better. Shut up. Yeah, she did. She knew perfectly fine what she was doing. But yeah, Patricia believed that due to her age when she committed the crime, the jury might feel guilty for her and let her walk free. Patricia, she would give a statement during the trial. Hold on. Patricia would give a statement during the trial and she would really let her feelings for Alyssa Bustamante be well known. She didn't hide how she felt at all. Patricia said the following in court: I will just say that I hate her. I hate everything about her. What I hate most of all is what everyone says about her age. The only thing her age makes her is an evil monster. 8 times she stabbed my child, and in her own words, it was amazing and enjoyable. She threw her in a hole and covered her in dirt like she was nothing, but she was something to me. Now, Patricia said that her last memory of Elizabeth was of a happy little girl. I'm getting emotional. I've really tried to hold it together and I feel like I've done a good job until now. And it's just so sad because this happy little girl, she has been robbed of the opportunity to live a full, happy life and to spend more time with her family, which was the one thing in the world that she enjoyed most. Now, Elizabeth's own family have stated that the most important thing that we can do for Elizabeth now is keep her memory alive, keep talking about her as the precious little girl that she was, who loved dress up, who loved playing with her friends, who loved dogs, who was just so kind and loving at her young age. And the other important thing is to make sure that her killer remains behind bars. So in 2014, Alyssa Bustamante does what a lot of these freaks do. She gets herself a new lawyer and she contended that she wouldn't have taken the plea back in 2012 if she had been made aware of a pending US Supreme Court case that affected how the justice system would handle juveniles and first-degree murder cases. Now, thankfully, hallelujah, this judge was not a complete doughball and denied the lawyer's plea for a new sentence. Rightfully so. Now, Elizabeth's mother, she would sue this convicted monster for damages in a wrongful death suit in October of 2015. Now, 2 years later, she would settle for $5 million. And the original wrongful death suit did actually include Pathways Hospital that had been treating Alyssa's mental health. Now, Patricia had included the Pathways Hospital and also 2 of its employees, and they would be included as defendants because Patricia believed had the hospital and had the hospital employees been doing their job correctly at that point, if they had monitored Alyssa in the way that they should have, they would have seen the signs and symptoms of a future murderer. And, possibly they would have admitted her to a psychiatric hospital. Now, the judge, they did decide to throw out the Pathways lawsuit, but they did keep the Alyssa Bustamante one. And Alyssa Bustamante, she owes the Alton family $5 million plus 9% interest for each year until the debt is paid. Now, Alyssa Bustamante, she was denied early release in July of 2024, this year. Her next parole hearing will be set for 2029, and it's such a shame because Elizabeth's stepfather had spoken out and he had stated that these parole dates, when they come up, it is just another day of grieving and pain for the family. It's like all the hurt and pain is thrown back in that family's face every single time there is a hearing for this monster. And Elizabeth's stepfather also said that Bustamante had said in great detail how and why she had killed Elizabeth, and it included things that was not included in the trial. And it is just absolutely devastating for her family to have to hear these extra bits of detail that they weren't aware of before, when they are trying their best to keep moving forward in life without their daughter. They are being told these new and horrific details that they just shouldn't hear. Now, I'm sure you can tell that I am absolutely 1000% on the side of Elizabeth Alton's family. I do not believe for a second that Alyssa Bustamante should ever see the light of day ever again. And honestly, if I had had it my way, I would have sentenced her much more severely and death penalty. Friar. That's how I feel. I think she's a horrific evil monster. I don't think there's any rehabilitating someone like that. And the pain and devastation that she has caused so many people is just unforgivable on another level. But I would really like to know your thoughts, feelings and opinions down below. Please keep everything kind, respectful in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but make sure you're respectful about it, because a young girl lost her life. A family have been robbed of their daughter and been robbed of watching her grow up and watching her accomplish everything that she should have. We just need to remember it's real people, and please, please, please remember Elizabeth Alton for who she was. Amazing little girl with the kindest heart, the sweetest soul, who just loved her family and friends so much. But that is it for today's case. I really hope I was able to do this one justice, because it really hit me and honestly kind of kept me up at night, because my heart just bleeds and breaks for the family and for poor Elizabeth. I mean, 9 years old, like, how can someone do that to anyone? But a 9-year-old is unfathomable. Mary Bell, who was the youngest female murderer in British history, and that statistic still remains to today. Mary Bell was 10 turning 11 years old when she murdered 2 young boys. One was a 3-year-old and one was a 4-year-old, and it's honestly just devastating to think what they went through and their families went through, but it's even more horrific to think that Mary Bell was released from prison just 12 years later when she was 23 years old, and she has been granted a lifetime of anonymity. So she's just out there living her life whilst those young boys' lives were stolen. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Also put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is 2 to 3 times per week. If you have any case suggestions or anything you would like me to cover, then leave them in the comments below or send them over to my email, which is up on screen now for you. But I really hope you enjoy this case. Let me know what you think, and without any further ado, let's get into this true crime and makeup episode. So, Mary Bell, wow, dubbed a Tyneside Strangler at age 11, which is pretty insane. But Mary Flora Bell was born on the 26th of May 1957 in Corbridge, Northumberland, and this is in England. Why did I say Northumberland like Northumberland? Northumberland. England. Now, Mary was the daughter of a well-known prostitute in the area, Elizabeth Betty Bell, also went by Betty McCricket. I will say as well that Elizabeth Bell always went by Betty, so I will be referring to her as Betty throughout this. So Betty at this point, she was a 16-year-old mother. She was very much like an absent mother figure. She was always travelling to Glasgow for her work. You know, like a business trip. She was always travelling. Now, with her being an absent mother, I know to most that seems like such a terrible thing for a child to go through, and I suppose it is if your circumstances are better than what Mary's were, but the truth is Mary got more rest when her mum was away travelling for work, because whenever Betty was at home, Mary would suffer severe physical and mental abuse at the hands of her mum. And it is said that unfortunately for Mary, she was an unwanted child and severely neglected. And Mary's auntie would say that when Mary was born and the doctors were trying to give Betty Mary to hold, Betty would scream at the doctors, she resented the doctors, and she would say, "Take that thing away from me." Like, this is her own daughter, and she was referring to Mary as that thing. Now, I know that birth is not easy, and I know that not everyone wants to be a mother, but the fact that she would go on to keep Mary despite friends and family offering to take Mary in and raise her as their own, Betty chose to keep Mary. And I don't know if it was so she could inflict this abuse that Mary said she did to her. Now, people that knew both Mary and Betty would say that Betty wanted Mary either dead or severely injured. Whenever Mary was left home with Betty, Mary would always get into these really life-threatening situations. In 1960, Betty dropped Mary from a first floor window. She was holding Mary and it was just kind of like, whoops, like just threw her out the first story window. Insane. On another occasion, Betty had plied Mary with a bunch of sleeping pills, which caused Mary to accidentally overdose. And like, she still has this baby. Like, make it make sense. It doesn't, I know. Now, some people were thinking she either desperately wants rid of this child, she wants child dead, or people did believe that Betty might have suffered from Munchausen's by proxy. Do you know that thing that Gypsy Rose Blanchard's mum had? Well, believed to have had? That's what they believe Betty might have had, that she wanted Mary to get hurt so she could have all the attention for herself. Like, Betty wanted it to be like, oh my god, Betty, your child is always hurt. How do you do it? And Betty would be like, oh, I just love my daughter. She's so worth it. But people knew that she hated Mary. I need you to hold my hand through this liner. I don't know what I'm doing, but like, stay with me, okay? So anyway, another bit of the story. So at one point, Betty did think, right, maybe it is better off for me and for Mary to some extent if I give her away. Just give her away to someone. So Betty had planned to give Mary away to this woman who was known to be quite mentally unstable, but she was a woman that couldn't have children of her own. So Betty was like, right, perfect candidate, I will give Mary to you. Betty hands over Mary to this woman, and then it's her older sister that has to travel alone across Newcastle to retrieve Mary and bring her back home, because apparently this woman was extremely mentally unstable and wouldn't have been in any fit state to look after Mary. No better than Betty could. These eyeliner wings are not even related, not even distantly, not even through step relatives. I know, but I can't do eyeliner, okay? I can't do it. So, if you were paying attention earlier, you would have heard me refer to Betty's family offering to take Mary in, right? They knew Betty couldn't handle it, so they wanted to take Mary in. That way she's still with family, so if Betty did want to rekindle that relationship at any point, she could. But Betty decided, no, I don't want this child, but I don't want you to have her either. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be a complete sicko and get her involved in my sex work. Yeah, I'm sorry to go there today, but this is what this woman done. According to Mary, this is what Mary's mum done to her. It is said that unfortunately Betty would allow multiple of her clients to partake in sadomasochistic sessions with Mary as a very, very young child. And she would tie Mary's arms behind her back, she would blindfold Mary with a pair of stockings, and once she was blindfolded, she would make Mary perform oral sex on her clients. And this is all absolutely vile and disgusting and heartbreaking, but Betty herself would also partake in these sessions that involve Mary. She would also get involved in sadomasochistic activities with her own child. Mary's whole childhood as she knew it was filled with child abuse, and horrifically on top of this abuse, she also witnessed the death of her 5-year-old friend who was hit by a bus right in front of her. And this in itself was more than enough to cause Mary to spiral. Now, by the age of 10, it was said that at this point, Mary had become a very strange, unsettling, withdrawn, yet manipulative kind of child. She wasn't the kind of child that you would really want your child being friends with. Just strange all around. Mary was also described as someone who always seemed on edge. Like, she was always on the edge of violence. Like, people believed at any moment Mary Bell would snap and get violent. And unfortunately, they were not wrong. So the weeks leading up to the murders, Mary was really exhibiting some strange, disturbing and dangerous behaviour. There was one time on the 11th of May 1968 where Mary was playing with a 3-year-old boy, and suddenly this 3-year-old boy falls from the top of the air raid shelter that they were playing on and really hurt himself. Now, his parents at the time believed this was some kind of accident, like he had just tripped and fallen over, but knowing what we know now, this was definitely not the case, and I would go as far to say that this might have been Mary's first attempt at murder. So the next day after this young boy had fell from the top of the air raid shelter, word spread around to people what had happened, right? This like freak accident when he was playing with Mary, like, you know, children will be children. However, when other mothers heard this, they became quite fearful because Mary had actually attempted to choke out quite a few of their daughters, like really tried to choke them out. So the mums had decided, you know, this seems a bit more than just an accident. Let's go to the police, just report what we know, see what happens. So once they report Mary to the police, Mary's brought in for like a police interview and ultimately just like a lecture on being careful, especially when you're playing with younger children, you need to be very careful and watch over them, blah, 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 blah. So Mary got like a slap on the wrist, but I mean, what else could they do for what was at the time a 10-year-old girl? So in Newcastle upon Tyne during like the 1960s, they had underwent this sort of urban renewal project. So some of the city boroughs that had these more like Victorian-esque houses, they were being demolished, and by demolishing these they were hoping that in their place they would be able to build more sort of like modern day houses and flats. Now it is worth stating that some families were still living within this currently being demolished area until they could wait for housing from the council so they could move out. Now a lot of the local children would play either very close or inside the derelict rubble that was left from the demolished houses, and the local children referred to this particular bit of rubble as Tin Lizzie. It was right next to the railway and it was parallel across from St Margaret's Road. On the 25th of May 1968, one day before Mary's 11th birthday, Mary would strangle 4-year-old Martin Brown to death in one of the upstairs bedrooms in one of the derelict houses. Now, it is thought that for this crime, Mary did act alone, but I don't know. As we get into it, you'll see what I mean, but I'm not sure. It was around 3:30 that afternoon that 3 young boys, like when I say young boys, I mean children, discovered the body of Martin Brown. Now, of course, as children do, they let out these horrific, blood-curdling screams, and a workman who was working across the road by the name of John Hall came running into the derelict house to see what was wrong, and he seen young Martin Brown's lifeless body just laying there. John Hall tried his very, very best to perform CPR whilst they waited on emergency services, and he honestly really did try his very best to save young Martin Brown, but it was too late. Now, whilst John Hall was performing CPR and attempting to save young Martin's life, 2 young girls appeared at the doorway. This was 10-year-old Mary Bell and 13-year-old Norma Bell. Now, I will state same last name but no relation. I think they were just friends. And whilst John is performing CPR on Martin, he is trying to shoo the girls away because in his mind he's like, I do not want these young girls seeing this poor boy lying in this condition because it would scar them for life. Little did he know, one of these girls had already seen young Martin Brown lying there dead, and that very same girl also seen young Martin Brown die at her own hands. And I know this is already horrendous, what this girl has done to this poor little boy, but what they decide to do, both Mary and Norma, they leave the derelict house where John Hall is performing CPR. They go over to Martin's auntie's house, Rita Finlay, and Rita comes to the door and Mary says, one of your sister's bairns has had an accident. I think it's Martin, but I can't tell because there's blood everywhere. Like, what little sickos I know that doesn't even cover it, right? But how sick? Now, at this point, the police are actually very confused because besides a bit of saliva and a little bit of blood on Martin's face, there's no real signs of violence that they can see. So they look next to young Martin's body and there's like a tub of pills there and the tub's empty. So in their mind they're thinking that Martin must have swallowed the pills and his death has just been this horrific accident. Like, if you think that, bring in toxicology, okay? Now, if you think that what Mary and Norma said to Rita Finlay was bad, you know, Martin's auntie, days after Martin's death, Mary Bell went over to the house where Martin lived to visit his mum. So she knocks on the door, Martin's mum comes to the door and she asks Martin's mum, "Can I see Martin?" And Martin's mum, obviously, because it's a child, is very gently explaining to Mary that Martin's dead, so she wouldn't be able to see him. Mary then says to Martin's mum, "Oh, I know he's dead, but I want to see him in his coffin." You sick little freak. So of course, Martin's mum slams the door in Mary Bell's face and she toddles off like nothing happened. Then, on Mary's 11th birthday, her and Norma decide that they're going to break into a school nursery. Just to do a wee bit of vandalising, you know, just get their artistic flair on display. They break into the nursery to begin the vandalising. However, when they're vandalising, they decide what they want to write is notes regarding Martin Brown's death. So they vandalise, they write these notes on the wall explaining that they were responsible for killing Martin and that they promise that they will kill again. Now, the notes were anonymous, but when you see them, I will put them up on the screen for you. When you see them, you can absolutely tell that that is a child's handwriting. Absolutely. So the police, they do see these vandalised like walls with the notes regarding Martin's death, but they think it's some sort of cruel, morbid prank and just kind of forget about it. The nursery, however, they were experiencing quite a few break-ins recently, so they were feeling a bit wary. So they installed like an alarm system, and a couple of nights later, both Norma and Mary were seen wandering outside, but apparently there was no sign that they were doing anything criminal, so they were just let go to get on with their evening. This is frustrating, right? Because a lot of Mary's classmates would later say that Mary was showing off and boasting in class, claiming that she had killed Martin Brown, but her classmates just assumed that she was trying to show off and make herself look big, so they never reported it and they never thought she was being serious until another young boy died. If you're suspicious about something, just say. It's always better to offend than someone else getting hurt. So on the 31st of July 1968, a 3-year-old named Brian Howie was last seen by his parents playing outside with their family dog, his sibling, and Norma Bell and Mary Bell. Now, that evening, Brian didn't return home when he was meant to, which really sparked concern with his relatives because Brian always came in on time. This was really unusual for him. So naturally, with them being so concerned, they think, you know what, we're going to have to report this and go out looking for Brian. So it was Brian's relatives and also just the neighbours in general that came out to help them have a look for him and hopefully find him. But unfortunately, this wouldn't turn anything up. What is so sick and twisted about this is Norma Bell and Mary Bell, they both volunteered to help Brian's sister look for him. And at one point, Mary Bell even pointed up to these concrete blocks up at Tin Lizzie, saying, "What about up there? Why don't we check up there?" But Norma sort of changed course and was like, "Oh no, like, he's not going to be up there. Like, nothing would happen to him up there. Let's go this way," to like throw them off the scent, because young Brian was up by the concrete blocks. So it was just after 11 p.m. that very evening that young Brian Howie's body was found, and police did interview a lot of the local children to see if anyone had last seen him anywhere in particular or seen anyone near him, but no one had anything to say. No one had seen him. Once the coroner's report would come back, this would be a huge shock, not only to Brian's relatives, but just to the community in general. I mean, this is another young boy that's died. So the coroner had said that as 3-year-old Brian's body started to cool, new marks did start to appear on his chest, and it was said that there was a letter M carved into his torso. M. Mary. Putting 2 and 2 together and I'm getting 4. I'm getting Mary Bell. That's what I'm getting. Now, the coroner said it was also very obvious that Brian had been strangled and that his nostrils had also been pinched so he wouldn't be able to breathe. There was multiple puncture wounds to Brian's legs, and there was also like sections of his hair that was cut out as well. And I'm so sorry to have to say this, but 3-year-old Brian's genitals had also been partially mutilated. Given the lack of force used to kill Brian, the coroner was able to determine that a child had killed him. A child killed by another child. Now, the coroner was also able to see that there was a lot of grey and maroon fibres around and on Brian's body. Now, they did search the Howie household to see if they could sort of find any items that would explain these fibres, but they couldn't. So they determined that the maroon and grey fibres had to have come from Brian's killer. Over 100 detectives and investigators across Northumberland were assigned to this investigation, and they interviewed over 1,200 children, including Mary and Norma. So both Mary and Norma were interviewed on the 1st of August, and it was said that both the girls were acting very strange. Like, Norma seemed really excited and upbeat to be being interviewed by the police and asked about the death, whereas Mary became very observant. The both of them had contradicting stories in certain areas, although they both did admit to playing with Brian on the day that he was murdered, but said that they hadn't seen him after lunchtime. So they must have been quite suspicious of Mary in the first place, because they actually done further questioning with Mary the next day, and this is when Mary started providing a bit more information, a bit more detail. She said that she seen Brian play with an 8-year-old boy, and she did say that she had later seen this boy covered in weeds and grass. And this is important because when Brian's body was discovered, he was actually covered by weeds and grass. She also said that this 8-year-old boy was carrying around a pair of scissors and that she seen him trying to cut off a cat's tail, but she said one of the scissor legs was bent so he couldn't succeed. And when the police heard this, it was like light bulbs went off in their head, because the bent leg of the scissor had not been told to anyone at all. No one knew about the bent leg on the scissors. Only the murderer would know something like this. And it is at this point where investigators believe that Mary Bell is the one who is guilty of both the murders. Then on the 4th of August, Norma Bell's parents contacted the police. Norma had confessed that she knew exactly what had happened to Brian. So Norma had claimed that Mary had taken her to a spot on the Tin Lizzie to show her where Brian's body was. And then she said that Mary proceeded to show her how to strangle a child. Norma said that Mary had confessed that she loved strangling children, she really enjoyed it and loved doing it and was planning to do more. So then the police needed a bit more concrete evidence, so Norma was able to draw a diagram of the score marks that were on Brian's body and where they would be, and this was completely accurate, which made the police believe her confession. And it's important to say that the diagram with these score marks had not been released to the public, so it was information only a killer or the killers would know. So the police, obviously, they're trying to find a weapon of some sort, so Norma's able to take them to the spot where they had hid the razor that the score marks had been made from. So then on the 5th of August, the police revisit Mary's home, and they're just questioning her again about her initial statement that she provided. And when they started questioning her about the things that Norma had told them, Mary shouted and screamed and started saying that the police were trying to brainwash her and that she was going to get her solicitor to them. How does an 11-year-old know what a solicitor is? I wouldn't have knew that. Would you have knew that? Because I wouldn't have knew that. Or at least I wouldn't have known in that situation that I would need one. I don't know. So for some reason the police decide that they're going to question Norma again that very same day, and at this point Norma then admits to being at the scene of the crime when Mary was strangling Brian, and she said that anytime that her and Mary went to the spot on the Tin Lizzie, that Mary would get really funny and start acting really strange. Now, with all this new information that's come to light, the detectives and investigators basically decide to do a forensic examination on clothes owned by Mary and Norma. So the grey fibres were a precise match to a woolen dress owned by Mary. And then the maroon fibres that had been found on Brian's shoes, they were an exact match to a maroon skirt owned by Norma. On the 7th of August 1968, Brian Howe's funeral did take place and over 200 people would attend. Now, DCI Dobson, he actually witnessed Mary standing watching Brian's coffin being carried out of his house, giggling and rubbing her hands together like that, like really excited to see his coffin. At this point, DCI Dobson did say he knew he had to bring Mary in as soon as possible to avoid another child being killed. Then at 8 p.m. that very same evening, both Mary and Norma were formally charged with the murder of Brian Howe. When the charge was made, Norma burst into tears, whereas Mary just shrugged her shoulders and said, "That's all right by me." Now, when the trial came around, the prosecutor did say that Mary Bell's only motivation for killing was due to the sheer enjoyment and excitement that it brought her. And the British press did refer to Mary, the child murderer, as evil. Like, yeah, you think? So the trial had lasted 9 days, and then on the 17th of December, the jury did retire to consider their verdict. So the jury did end up deliberating for 3 hours and 25 minutes before they would reach their final verdict. Now, for some reason, Mary Bell was cleared of murder but was found guilty of manslaughter for both the young boys, so Martin Brown and Brian Howe. It was said that the reason that Mary got manslaughter and not murder was because the court psychiatrist had basically said that Mary exhibited classic symptoms of psychopathy and therefore she could not be held fully responsible for her actions. Okay. And Norma Bell was actually acquitted of all charges. I don't know if they just seen her as like an unwilling accomplice, or I don't know, it's a bit weird to me. It's just a bit strange. I don't know how I feel about that. Now, I don't know, maybe this is just me and maybe I'm thinking far too much into it because she is just a child. But when Norma had heard the verdict, she got really excited and started clapping her hands. And then when Mary heard her verdict, she got a little bit upset as she watched her mum and her grandmother cry. The judge did conclude saying that Mary was dangerous and that she was a danger to other children. So she was sentenced to be imprisoned at Her Majesty's pleasure. And basically that's a British legal term that denotes an indeterminate sentence. So we don't really know how long she was going to be away for. And at the time of Mary Bell's manslaughter convictions, she was 11 years and 6 months old, which makes her the youngest female killer in Britain, and that statistic is actually still active to this very day. She still holds that title. Now, obviously, because Mary was convicted and imprisoned when she was so young, she did sort of go to multiple different places throughout her incarceration. In 1977, she was residing in an open prison when her and another inmate, Annette Priest, they basically left the prison and just didn't go back. They fled to Blackpool, where they were going to the amusements. They spent a couple of days with some boys and they were actually sleeping over at the boys' house. Mary Bell was then arrested in a Derbyshire home of one of the men that she had been spending time with, and they said that she had dyed her hair blonde to try and disguise her identity, which to me just shows that she had no intention of going back. Like, she was hoping this was it, she was free. She was then returned to custody that very evening, and then Priest was actually arrested again in Leeds because her and Mary had split up halfway through their trip. And the only punishment that Mary Bell got for leaving the prison and not coming back was 28 days without her prison privileges. Yeah, you really showed her. Yeah. Now, Mary has made many claims throughout her imprisonment, but she did claim that when she was 13 years old that she was being sexually abused at the facility that held her. I believe she was the only girl out of a group of 24, so the rest would have been boys, but she never said whether it was staff or inmates, and either way the story's never been corroborated. This is absolutely crazy, and this should hopefully shock you as much as it shocked me. Mary Bell was released from prison in 1980. She was being held at HM Prison Askham Grange after only serving 12 years. 12 years. After being given an indeterminate sentence as well, she could have been away for life. But no, 12 years. 12 years for the murder of 2 children, 3 and 4 years old. So when she was released, she was 23 years old with her whole life ahead of her, and she was granted full anonymity. Yep, which really just rings to me like John Venables and Robert Thompson. If you know that case, then you know. If you don't, look it up, or I might cover it if you want, I don't know. Now, after her release, a spokesman came forward and said that Mary Bell just wanted the opportunity to live a normal life and to be left alone. Well, lucky for you, Mary, you're actually getting to live a life, you know, unlike the ones that you robbed from the 3 and 4 year old boys that you killed. Then 4 years after she had been released from custody, on the 25th of May 1984, Mary Bell gave birth to a daughter that would prove to be her only child. Long may that continue. Now, Mary Bell's daughter knew nothing about Mary Bell's past until 1998. Now, the reason she found out about her mum's past was because reporters had actually tracked down Mary Bell's location, which was in like a little resort town on the Sussex coast. Now, with this revelation, hundreds of people gathered outside Mary Bell's home where her and her daughter was living, so they were taken away to a safe house, and then they would later relocate to somewhere else within the United Kingdom. Mary Bell did apparently move back to Tyneside for a short amount of time. She did live there for a while, but then she moved away again. So anonymity for Mary Bell's daughter was only meant to go until she was the age of 18, but Mary wound up basically winning a high court battle that would extend her daughter's anonymity until, well, the rest of her life. So not until any time. The rest of her life she was granted anonymity. And then this anonymity also extended to Mary Bell's daughter's daughter, so Mary Bell's granddaughter, who is also going to have a lifetime of anonymity. And with this sort of order in place, it does mean that the general public are not allowed to sort of delve in and divulge her details of where she lives or what alias she now goes by. So in 1998, Mary Bell did collab with an author to tell her life story. The book is called Cries Unheard, the story of Mary Bell, and within the book it basically details her childhood, the abuse that she suffered, the murders, incarceration, etc. And of course Mary Bell's current whereabouts is unknown. No one has any idea where she resides, where she's living. She is just living her best life with her daughter and granddaughter. Now, the author who collaborated on this book with Mary Bell does say that Mary Bell does not believe that her childhood excuses her behaviour, and she also doesn't deny the crimes that she committed. She very much openly admits to them and owns them. But yeah, just a shame that she gets to live this full life and these children don't get a life whatsoever, and their parents had to live a life of distress, heartbreak, anguish, to name a few. Today we are covering the case of Ana Kriegel, which is a case that was requested maybe a month or 2 ago. I was requested it in the comments and also via email, so I finally got around to getting this video filmed. This is a case that I have not been able to stop thinking about ever since I heard about it. Ana Kriegel was a young girl. She had big hopes and dreams for the future. She was a typical teenage girl who loved to sing and dance. She would put videos of her dancing on the internet. She loved makeup and false nails. And she was one of life's kind people. And devastatingly, her kind heart and her kind soul and her nature and her desire to make friends would be seen as her weakness in between bullies and in between the 2 scumbag little boys who murdered her and took her life away. I'm very passionate and very opinionated on this case, which maybe not everyone will like, but I cannot help how I feel toward the people who murdered Ana Kriegel. I'm sure a lot of you will agree with what I say, some of you might not, but that's fine. This is a platform where we can discuss things in the comments and still be nice and respectful of each other. But I just feel like Ana Kriegel's life was taken far too early, and they have truly taken one of life's good people off of this earth, and I hope they get every single punishment that comes their way. Before I get into the case, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Tell any friends or family to subscribe as well who you think might enjoy my videos. It would mean the world to me. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the tragic case of Ana Kriegel. So Anastasia, also known as Anna, and for the most part I will refer to her as Anna because her family and friends referred to her that way, but Anastasia Kriegel, she was born in Novokuznetsk, which is in Russia, and she was born there in February 2004. Now, I could not find a definitive date of birth for Anna. I just know that it was February 2004. And what we do know is when she was a young infant, she was placed into an orphanage. However, she was later then adopted by Geraldine Kriegel as well as her French husband Patrick Kriegel, and Anna went to live with them in Ireland. She wasn't in an orphanage for very long, for 2 years at the very most, maybe just slightly less. The Kriegels were so excited to take Anna home. Anna was going to be their first child, and there's always that special connection to the first child. There's like that overwhelming excitement, and they just couldn't wait to welcome this beautiful little girl into their lives and into their family. Now, even though the Kriegels, they had no other connection to Russia besides Anna, but they thought it was really important for Anna that she basically keeps that connection with her native culture, the country that she's from. She should be proud to be Russian. So they ended up keeping her name Anastasia, or Anastasia, I don't really know how you would say it there, but most people wound up calling her Anna anyway, but they just wanted her to know who she was, where she was from, and to be proud of that, which I think is such a big deal. I think that's so important. Like, don't try and mask the thing that makes someone stand out and makes them a bit different to those around them. You know, I think it's so important to nurture that, and that's exactly what the Kriegels did with Anna. Now, throughout Anna's short life, she was a very keen singer and dancer, and she would actually like record videos of herself dancing and post it on YouTube. So like she had like her own little YouTube channel, and she was just doing things that any other typical teenage girl would do. You know, she loved her fake nails, she would wear them all the time, she loved music, she loved social media. She had various social media accounts that she would use and post on a daily basis, which I think as a teenager I can certainly relate to, and I'm sure this generation most definitely can. The one thing that really stood out for me in terms of Anna just, you know, totally embracing who she is and being herself was the fact that she was posting on YouTube as a teenager. Like, I would never have done that. I started my YouTube channel when I was 19, and that content, don't go looking for it, it's not here anymore. But I was like so embarrassed, like, and I shouldn't have been, but God, if I was like 13, 14, I could never have posted myself on YouTube because I cared too much about what people thought. So I think it's amazing that Anna had this willingness to just be who she was. Now, Anna's mum, she would refer to Anna as a typical Serbian. She was tall, she was strong, not just physically, but mentally. She was a really strong swimmer, and she was a very, very strong gymnast. Like, this is a girl of so many talents, like so precious. Like, it sounds like anything Anna put her hand to, she could do. And obviously this whole Serbian thing must have been like an in thing with the family. And on the day that Anna sadly passed away, her Facebook profile picture was actually a Serbian wolf. Or would you say, how do you say that? Oh my God, guys, I've been saying Serbian, I meant Siberian. A Siberian wolf, and Anna was a typical Siberian. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna put it down like holiday brain fog, right? Now, in particular, Anna's dad, Patrick Kriegel, he would spend a lot of time with Anna. He was a retired lecturer, so this gave him lots of spare time to spend with his daughter, and he just lapped up every single minute of it, whether it was doing the school runs or preparing Anna's packed lunch. Like, he just loved and adored her, and anything that meant spending time with Anna was so important to Patrick. He said that her primary years were probably some of her happiest years, and she was so strong and so positive despite suffering from a wide variety of health issues. But you know, that Siberian mindset. She was strong. Now, when Anna was a young girl, the doctors had devastatingly found a tumour in Anna's right ear, and they wound up having to do a 5.5-hour surgery to remove this tumour. Now, after the removal of this tumour, Anna did struggle with her hearing, and she would often have to like stand or walk on the left hand side of people so she could hear them better. She did also suffer with poor eyesight, which really affected her, and Anna also had a scar on the back of her head where she had to undergo her operation. Now, despite these really challenging health issues, and you know, not just physically challenging but mentally challenging, you have to be mentally as strong as you possibly can to come out the other side of something so huge. And Anna really did push through, but as her primary school years came to an end, this is particularly when Geraldine and Patrick noticed a notable change in their daughter and how she felt. Now, Anna had actually confided in one of her school teachers at one point, and she told them that she was feeling suicidal. Like, she was in a really, really bad frame of mind. And of course, the teachers, they listened to Anna, they gave her a space to speak, and they told her parents about how Anna was feeling and just how bad her thoughts were getting. Now, on top of everything that Anna's already battling with and battling through, she had this really painful condition when she was a teenager, and it can be relatively common through certain groups of adolescents, but it's basically this painful condition where your bones are growing faster than your muscles, and she was in agony with this. This was really hard for Anna to get through. Like, that constant pain was always there. Now, despite everything that Anna was going through, both mentally and physically, she was really excited to start secondary school, and I think most of us can relate. I was really excited to get into secondary school, wound up not enjoying it that much, but it just felt like I was finally growing up, and I think Anna felt that same way. And it's also an opportunity to meet new people, make new friends, sometimes lifelong friends. So Anna was excited. Despite Anna feeling very excited for this big change and going into secondary school, unfortunately her parents and also her resource teacher, they didn't feel the same way. Anna was a very, very kind girl, and although she was headstrong and although she was physically strong, she was naive, she was very innocent, and there's nothing wrong with that. But her resource teacher was very nervous that children in secondary school might look at that in Anna and see it as her weakness and take advantage of her. So they did speak to Geraldine and Patrick about this, and it was a worry that they also had as well. Ultimately, Anna was excited and they didn't want to ruin that excitement for her. Now, at just age 14, Anna stood at 5'8". We're talking supermodel height here, right? She was blessed 5'8", and she did look much older than 14, but despite this, inside she was very much still quite immature, not in a bad way, but just, you know, naive, like we were saying. Again, nothing wrong with that, that all comes with age, but Anna was particularly naive and innocent and very, very childlike. Also, like, I'm so jealous. Like, see, when I was in high school, I just wanted to be taller. And I mean, now I'm 26 and I stand at like 5'4" on a good day, right? With like a wee lift in my trainers. I think I'm maybe 5'3", but it was my dream to be like, I wanted to be 5'7". Okay, and I used to tell everyone that I was 5'6". I don't know if that was like a fever dream or if it took place and then I shrunk. Don't know, but I really wanted to be 5'7" or up, but I wasn't, and I'm still not. So as much as Patrick and Geraldine, they didn't want to ruin Anna's positive outlook on going into secondary school, but you know, it's their daughter, they're gonna worry. So they decided to meet with the teachers of the secondary schools, like the head teacher, and they just expressed their concerns that Anna might be a potential target for bullies due to her kind nature and her childlike nature. They just wanted them to be aware and on the lookout for Anna and just make sure that she was doing okay. And devastatingly, Anna's parents and her teachers' concerns, they were absolutely correct. Anna was the target for bullies. Like, the bullies didn't wait for Anna to start high school. The bullying started throughout the summer before she even got to secondary school. There was online bullying, there was sexually suggestive messages being sent to Anna, whether this was Facebook or Instagram, I'm not entirely sure, but it all started before she could even get her foot in secondary school. Now, the main people who were bullying her online was actually third years, so people 3 years older than Anna. They were the ones that were targeting her and bullying her profusely, and it was just disgusting. The things that they were saying to her was they were making fun of her because she was adopted. They would laugh at her and tell her that she had a fake mum and dad. They laughed about how her real mum and dad abandoned her and wanted nothing to do with her, and the fact that she was Russian. Now, at this point, Anna, she does confide in her mum and dad. So Patrick and Geraldine, what they do is they screenshot the messages of the harassment and bullying that Anna's been receiving, and they take it into the secondary school and they say, look, this is what's going on. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to protect Anna? Unfortunately, not much was done to protect Anna. In the eyes of the school, there wasn't much they could do. Like, schools bang on about bullying, how you should report it, how you should be kind, XYZ, but schools, they never do anything until it's too late. Or at least what I've seen and experienced in life, they will not do anything until it's too late, and then they want to play the loving teachers and the loving school who wish they could have done more but chose to do nothing whilst it went on. I'm getting heated, okay? This is a passionate subject for me. I mean, you would hope and you would think that now that the school has seen these messages, they know who they're from, they know which students it's been, you would think that they would take some initiative, have a word with them, or at least look out for Anna and watch out for any bullying taking place and nip it in the bud. But they didn't. And when Anna got to secondary school, she was bullied endlessly. Now, during secondary school, Anna was becoming increasingly stressed and agitated, which Patrick said that was not like his daughter. Like, usually she would come home happy from primary school, be in a good mood. When they would talk about her day, she'd say all these great things that went on. However, now when Anna would come home and talk about her day, she had no nice stories to tell. It was all sad, awful stories about what people are saying to her and how she's being treated at school. Now, something that a lot of the bullies would say about Anna at school was that she was a weirdo. And this really frustrated Patrick and Geraldine because Anna's not weird. Anna is just Anna. And Patrick said Anna was very misunderstood. She was someone who was full of fun, always wanted to have a laugh and a joke, and for some reason, people just could not accept Anna for who she was. And let me tell you, Anna was a great person, a beautiful kind soul. So, like, what is it that they're not getting? I think they're just targeting Anna, number one, because she's from a different country, and number two, because she is adopted. Anna sounds like a great person to be friends with. She sounds like a kind person and the kind of person who would love her friends endlessly. Now, what's even more testament to Anna's character is the fact that no matter how badly she was treated, she could never ever treat anyone the way that they were treating her. Even her bullies, she couldn't bully anyone, she couldn't hate anyone, she couldn't be nasty to anyone, no matter how they were treating her. And that is testament to her character of just how kind she really is. And this bit made me so sad because Anna, as much as it would be horrible her being bullied and mistreated, her real sadness and disappointment came from the fact that people like this exist. You know, not everyone is as kind as she is, and I think that's a really hard realisation as a child or a teenager, is you realise that the world is not a kind place. It's not all sunshine and roses, and I think that can be really detrimental to your mental health when you realise that the world and people aren't how you thought they would be. Now, Anna would do her best and try her best to make friends with anyone and everyone, and this just didn't seem to work for Anna. And Geraldine would say that they'd see these big group of girls walking around together like all best friends, and then there would be Anna just walking by herself, not included in any conversations, and no one even looking in her direction or wanting to speak to her. And as a parent, that must be soul destroying to witness. Like, why is your daughter the one that no one wants to be around? Like, what? Oh, I honestly could cry when I talk about things. I just think it's so horrible. Like, bullying people, like people who bully do not understand what this does to people. Now, all of Anna's family would say that she was a very innocent young girl who just craved friendship. She craved to be around people, and you know, she did spend a lot of time with her family, and well, I mean, she'd spend all her time with her family because she didn't have anyone else to. And whilst Patrick and Geraldine loved spending time with their daughter, they just wished and longed for people to accept Anna. So she had friends her own age, best friends her own age, that she could, you know, hang about with, go into town with, have sleepovers with, like just be a normal teenage girl. But she was not being given this opportunity by anyone. Now, at one point it was said that Anna started to act in very worrying ways. Like, she was getting into fights at school, she got suspended from school. At one point she had painted a black eye onto herself as well, which to me just sounds like a cry for help. Now, Anna's parents believe that the reason that she was doing this kind of stuff to herself was to express the pain that she was feeling, what she was going through. Now, it was also discovered that Anna was making fake social media accounts to bully herself and basically treat herself how other people were treating her. And honestly, for me, I truly believe yet again that this is just a desperate cry for help. Like, no one does that. No one in a sound state of mind does that to themselves unless they are desperately needing help. When her mum and dad discovered that she was doing this to herself, Geraldine would get all her passwords for all her social media accounts and she would check them on a nightly basis just to monitor the bullying that was happening from other people, but also just trying to ensure that Anna wasn't doing this to herself as well. Now, because Anna's mental health was just declining further, her parents stepped in and they tried to get her help from the Kildare Youth Services. Now, they said that because Anna was self-harming, she would have to be referred to Pieta House, which would work with youths who were struggling with self-harm and suicidal thoughts. And they did. They got her in those services and seeing a counsellor and getting some help for her mental health. And the people that she was seeing, they did say that they were quite pleased with Anna's progress. You know, she was really working hard to better her health, better her mental health, and really try and take care of her mind. They were so pleased with her progress that after a certain point, they had decided that she was now a low-risk suicide attempt. So her thoughts weren't so at the surface as they were before, and she was lower risk. Now, after just 6 sessions at Pieta House, they were so happy with her progress that she could then be referred to Kildare Youth Services. And this is something Anna would attend on a frequent basis. And at the time of Anna's murder, she was still attending the Kildare Youth Services. Now, the day of Anna's disappearance was May the 14th, 2018, and Anna had attended one of the Kildare Youth Services appointment that very day. So before she went off to school, she reminded Geraldine that she needed a note so she could leave school early for her appointment. Geraldine goes ahead, she writes Anna her note to get out of school, and then she gives her a kiss goodbye and they head off for the day. Now, that very day, Anna was meant to be having lunch at school before, you know, attending her appointment that day, but she decided that she was going to come home, have lunch at home, and then after having lunch at home, she left for her appointment. And then when her appointment ended, she came home and made herself a snack and spent some time in her room. Now, it's really important to note that usually Anna and Geraldine, they would call or text throughout each day. So when Anna is in her room, she makes a phone call to Geraldine at 4:02 p.m. So 2 minutes past 4 in the afternoon. However, at this point, Geraldine's in a meeting, so of course cannot answer her phone. So she texts Anna back and she just says, you know, I'm really busy, I'm in a meeting just now, but as soon as I'm out, I'll give you a call. But around 4:55 p.m, Patrick was sitting outside. He was enjoying some of the nice weather that they were having when the doorbell goes. And it's at this point that we are being introduced to boy A and boy B. So Patrick, he opens the door to boy B and boy B asks if Anna's home. So Patrick, in his mind, he's a bit like, this is strange. No one usually comes to the house for Anna, but in his mind he was quite excited because here was someone Anna's own age that wanted to see her. So Patrick calls up the stairs to Anna and says, "Boy B's at the door." Anna looks very confused, almost like, why are you here? Like, this doesn't make sense. But she went to the door anyway. When Anna was standing at the door speaking to boy B, Patrick did notice that Anna and the boy seemed to be whispering. That's quite normal for teenagers, like when we're teenagers, everything's a big secret, everything's a big deal, and you don't want your mum and dad to hear. So they're whispering at the door, and then Anna shuts it over, runs upstairs, grabs a hoodie, and starts to head out the door with boy B. Now, as she is heading out the door, Patrick tells her to be home at a decent time because she had some studying to do. Anna's a bit annoyed because she's like, well, no one told me that I had to do any studying tonight, so that's a bit annoying, but sure, okay, I'll be back. Now, once Anna had headed out the door with boy B, Patrick realises he's not asked her where she's going, and I think it's just in that kind of like flurry of a moment, they were both taken aback at the fact that someone was at the door for Anna. So I don't even think he was thinking about that in the time, but he runs to the door and he can see that Anna and boy B are headed toward St. Catherine's Park. Now, boy B was carrying a small backpack and he was a bit ahead of Anna and they weren't really talking. So Geraldine, she arrives home a bit earlier than she expected to, and she goes out into the back garden to see Patrick, who is still enjoying the nice weather. She asks where Anna is and Patrick tells her, someone came by, like boy B came by for Anna. He still couldn't believe it. And Geraldine couldn't believe it either, but for a different reason. Because Geraldine knows that boy B takes nothing to do with Anna. He wasn't a friend of Anna, he wasn't an acquaintance of Anna. Geraldine even said that a lot of her concern came from the fact that nobody ever called for Anna. This was very, very strange. So just shortly after 5:30pm, Geraldine texts Anna and just says, "Home now." She knows something's up. Call it mother's intuition, right? She knew that something wasn't right. Now, Anna, she's someone who usually responds right away. She keeps her family up to date. She didn't respond to this message. So a few minutes later, Geraldine texts her again and she says, "Answer me now or I'm going to call the police." She just knows in her gut that something's wrong. Now, at this point, Anna's only been gone around half an hour and Geraldine is already beside herself. Something is off. So after still receiving no response, Geraldine is so worried about Anna. So she decides to take a walk down to St. Catherine's Park. And while she's there, she does see a bunch of children. There's dogs out a walk, but no sign of Anna and no sign of boy B. So Geraldine, she is obviously scared. She feels like something's just not quite right, but this could just be because it's not the norm for Anna to have anyone come round or to go out and hang around with anyone. So she does go home, she tries to settle down a bit, she has her dinner, but she cannot shake this feeling that something's wrong. So again, she is trying to find Anna. Now, Anna is a girl who loved long walks. She was always off on long walks by herself, just her and her music, drowning out the world. So Geraldine thinks, you know what, she could be anywhere. She could just be on one of her big long walks. So she takes a car and heads out and looks for Anna, but still no result. So when she gets home, both Geraldine and Patrick, they are on Facebook. They're trying to see if they can find boy B's surname so they can maybe locate him and ask, where are you and Anna? So they get his surname and then they're ringing around and trying to get his address so they can go and speak to him or his family members directly, but no one could provide this. Now, Geraldine and Patrick, they decide to go and talk to a retired police detective, John Cribben, and he told them immediately to contact the Garda. Now, at this point, Anna's been missing for 4 hours, and when they contact the Garda, they give them the boy's name and they go to boy B's house to speak to him. Now, when the Garda go to speak to boy B does confirm that, yeah, he was with Anna for a little while. They went to the park, they had a walk around, they were chatting away, but then he left her around 5:40pm. Now, this is really worrying for Geraldine and Patrick because if he left her at 5:40, why was she still not home? There was no sign of her being with anyone else. There was no record of her going to be with anyone else. So where did Anna go? Now, devastatingly, the next day comes and Anna is still not home. She is still missing, and Geraldine and Patrick are just getting the most awful feeling in their gut. So because Anna is still missing, the Garda decide that they need to go back and speak to Boy B again. This time just to see if they remembered anything else. Like, was there anyone around? Did Anna mention that she was going to go meet anyone else? Is there anything else that he could tell them that might help them locate Anna? Now, Boy B all of a sudden, he comes out with the details, right? So Boy B says that he went to Anna's house to get Anna on behalf of Boy A. Boy A was the one that wanted to see Anna, but he wanted Boy B to fetch her for him. Now, apparently, Anna had a crush on Boy A, and Boy A wanted to speak to Anna in person to do the right thing, let her down gently, and tell her that he wasn't interested. If it's this innocent, why didn't you just say it before? But also, like, there's people out here ending 10-year relationships over text. I think it would have been okay to let Anna down over Facebook Messenger. So now, Boy B ends up taking a walk to the park with the police, and basically to show the police where he had left Anna, where Anna had met up with Boy B, and the police would mark these locations on GPS on Tetra radio. So on Tuesday, May the 15th, the Garda, they wind up releasing photos of Anna to the wider public to appeal for any information of anyone who might have seen Anna on the day of her disappearance. So they provide photos of Anna, they give a detailed description of what she looked like, what her hair was like, what she was wearing, and they also have photos of Anna in the clothing that she was wearing that day. So the Garda, they decide what they're going to do is they're going to go back to the park with Boy A and Boy B. So both of them this time. Now, Boy B, he takes the lead as he needs to show the route that he showed the police the last time. However, the Garda very quickly notice that Boy B is leading them down a different route than he did the last time. Now, this is the thing, if you're going to lie, you need to remember your lies. And if you're going to lie about the route that you took, you need to remember that fake route. So police decide at this point in time they're going to take both Boy A and Boy B in to provide formal statements. So Boy B, his statement kind of matches up to the one that he provided previous, so he's sticking to his story. And Boy A had claimed that Anna asked him out and he let her down gently, and then she stormed off in the huff. She was annoyed, she was sad, and she just walked away from him. Now, after Anna left, according to Boy A, he started his walk home where he was attacked by two males. He was jumped randomly by two males, and this had left him with a few injuries. Now, the injuries were somewhat consistent with his story, but of course, something feels off, because isn't it just a bit crazy that a young girl goes missing and you've suddenly been attacked and got injuries? Make it make sense. Now, these males, Boy A said that they were older. They were basically adults, grown men, and Boy A was somehow able to fight them both off. Now, the Garda had said that when Boy A was telling the story of fighting off his attackers, it was like a fantasy. It was almost like he was zoning out and was in like some kind of game or story, and he was like this big, strong, defeating character. But it's two grown men, and you're saying that you battered the both of them and took off with a few minor scrapes. Okay. Now, the Garda, they decide to take Boy A to formal headquarters to compile like a photo fit sketch of the attackers. And funnily enough, he gives them this, description and doesn't turn anyone up. They don't find anyone under that description. And I wonder why. Now, it was around Wednesday the 16th of May that the fears were very prominent throughout Anna's family and the town that Anna had been either severely harmed or possibly killed. And what's really devastating is on Wednesday the 17th, 2018, their fears would be confirmed because Anna's body was discovered in this derelict building that was known as Glenwood House. Now, one of the Garda, Sean White, he looked into what would later be considered Room 1, and at this point it was very dark, and in the dark he thought he could see what at this point he believed to be a mannequin. Now, White went and got the search leader who went in and was able to confirm that the figure in the room was not a mannequin, it was in fact the body of Ana Kriegel. Now, Anna, when her body was found, she was completely naked apart from her black socks. Her phone was nearby and also her clothes were scattered around her. And not too far away was this big cement block and also a stick, which they believed they could see like blood and blood spatter on. They also described seeing Teskin insulation tape wrapped around Anna's neck, and she had 3 of her fingers through the tape as if she was trying to remove it and escape. Now, upon examining her body, there looked to be around 50 separate injury sites on Anna's body, and her false nails that she was wearing were also scattered around the room, and this signalled to the police that Anna had tried her very best to put up a fight. And even more horrifically, it was very evident that penetration had occurred to Anna's body, and they didn't know right away what object or, if it was a penis that had penetrated her or attempted to penetrate her. Although it was evident that there was penetration of some sort, they didn't know whether it was full penetration or attempted. But the Forensic Science of Ireland, they actually discovered semen stains on Anna's top as well, whilst they were conducting an analysis of her clothing. And what's absolutely horrific is Anna's parents that very night had to attend the morgue to make a formal identification of their daughter, which is just the most horrific thing. Like, no parent should lose their child. Like, it's just not the natural way of things, Parents die and their child lives on. It's very, very foreign for a child to pass away before their parents. Now, at this point, Boy A and Boy B, they were the sole focus of the Garda's investigation, and the evidence that would come forward over the next couple of days just further solidified this for them. Now, Forensic Science Ireland, they were able to confirm that the blood on Boy A's boots was a complete match for Ana Kriegel. So Anna's blood was on his boots. It's like a slam dunk from here. Now, when Boy A had basically said that he had been assaulted by 2 grown men and attacked, they had seized his phone at this point just to see if they could find any information regarding the assault. And instead they would find some very, very concerning searches. In his search results, they had found the top 15 most gruesome torture methods in history, and there was also search results for Jeff the Killer. However, the most damning search would be abandoned places in Lucian. Yeah, Glenwood House. Yeah. Now, at this moment in time, Boy A and Boy B, they're only 13 years old, so as always, concessions are made for them left, right and centre, including protecting their identity, as usual. So on May the 23rd, 2018, the parents of Boy A and Boy B, they were made formally aware that their sons were going to be arrested the next day. And the parents were actually asked if they could bring the boys to the station the next morning. The parents were allowed to bring them in. I don't know if that's because they were so young or if it was to avoid a scene or avoid them being scared. I don't know. And then, of course, after the arrest of the young boys, their houses were searched immediately. Now, after Boy A had been arrested, he had his sort of formal interview in the presence of his father and his solicitor. Now, detectives, they asked him if he knew the difference between right and wrong and also the difference between a truth and a lie. They also were trying to strike up some conversation with him to build some sort of rapport. So they asked his interests and his hobbies, and for his interests, he said the body, the anatomy and skeletons. This is a troubled boy. Yeah. Now, during the interview, Boy A's story did match most of what Boy B had also told the detective. So obviously, they've got their story straight. long before this has happened, like probably when they were premeditating the murder of poor Ana Kriegel, they've thought about their stories. Now, detectives, they show boy A CCTV footage, right? And on this footage is him and boy B walking together. Now, when boy A sees this footage, he tries to claim, oh my God, that is the boys, that's the men that attacked me. And the police are like, son, it's you. Now, when the police had also told boy A that the blood on his boots were a complete match for Ana Kriegel's, he said that was impossible. Absolutely impossible. He does not know how that happened. And also, he did not search for gruesome torture methods. That wasn't him. It was Patricia. And then any other questions he was asked, he was responding, I don't know, I'm not sure, no comment. Just really unhelpful stuff, because to be honest, there was nothing he could say because he could not answer for what they needed because he was guilty. Now, at this point, boy B, he's beginning to become a bit more cooperative, you know? 5 interviews in and he wants to cooperate now. And throughout his 5th interview, he just started to admit more and more and more. So boy B claimed that Ana Kriegel had went into room 1 with boy A, and boy B had said that he went to go and explore the house. It's this big abandoned house. He was quite interested in it, so off he trotted and he left Ana and boy A alone in room 1. Now, he said that a shuffling noise in the house made him re-enter room 1, where he witnessed boy A flip Ana Kriegel. Ana Kriegel was crying out, she was screaming, she was begging for him to stop. She was screaming, no, don't do this. And then boy B claimed at this point he ran away. He was scared, he took off, ran away. Now, at this point, whilst the police know that this is not the full story, it's certainly a lot closer than what they had previously been. Now, the police, they had took boy B's interview pages, they had them photocopied and they provided them to boy A and read them out to him. And boy A basically said, boy B, he's lying. Absolute lies, none of that took place. He is a lie, he's trying to blame me. He is trying to blame me. However, on Thursday the 25th of May 2018, the police were given permission to charge boy A with murder. Good. And once he was charged with murder, the evidence against him would very quickly accumulate. So they found his backpack in his bedroom, which contained knee guards, shin pads, gloves, a scarf / snood type thing, and also a mask. And the police, of course, would refer to this as his murder kit or his kill kit, but this showed premeditation. He knew what he was going to do when he met up with Ana Kriegel. And also, by the police finding gloves, this explained to them why they couldn't find any fingerprints at the scene. So this was all adding up. Now, on boy A's phone, they found 12,500 images, and most of these were pornographic images. Now, on his phone, he also had some pornographic videos. These videos would refer to a woman called Anastasia, Anna's real, her full name, and also Russian teens. Yeah. So it's like, was the plan to just rape Ana, or was it always going to be to rape and kill Ana? Because quite clearly, this is sexually motivated. Bearing in mind, these boys are 13. 13. And this is what's embedded in their brains. And of course, the semen that was found on Ana Kriegel's top matched boy A's DNA to a T. Now, boy B, he was rearrested by appointment on the 8th of July, and he said that a month before the death and murder of Ana Kriegel, boy A had asked boy B if he wanted to kill her. Now, boy B claims that he believed that his friend boy A was just joking. Weird joke, weird sense of humour, but okay. Now, boy B said that when he entered the house, he did in fact pick up the big stick, that bloodstained stick, but he had no involvement in Anna's murder, despite that being a weapon. Now, investigators at this point, they are just point blank fed up with the lies, and they say to boy B, we are so sick and tired of you telling lie after lie after lie after lie. You need to tell us the truth. Boy B continued to say that he didn't actually think that boy A would have killed Ana, and he didn't believe it would actually happen, but he was scared, he was terrified. Imagine how Ana felt then. Imagine. Now, the Central Criminal Court, they were asked to clear a non-negotiable 4 weeks for this trial to take place. Now, they wanted this to start in the first half of 2019, and so the trial actually began on the 29th of April 2019. Now, Geraldine and Patrick Kriegel, they were there for every single moment of this trial when they had to listen to the most horrific and heinous details about how their daughter's life was stolen, not only from her, but from them. Now, in the trial, some of Boy B's interview was shown to the court, and in this footage, he claimed that Anna was a social outcast, she was a weirdo, she wore slutty clothes, and that she was a girl that he would not be around. You disgusting, disgusting little scumbag. Now, I have to say, credit to Geraldine and Patrick, they are just some very classy, strong people. Even having to hear and witness this, they remained as calm and collected as they possibly could for Anna. Now, what is actually just so ridiculous is a barrister tried to claim that the sexual activity between Boy A and Anna was consensual. What? The age of their children, number one, they cannot legally consent to any sexual activity, and you should bloody know that. As a barrister, you should know that sexual activity cannot be consented to by individuals of their ages. How stupid are you? Like, this guy got his degree in a cereal box. I'm not joking. He must have printed a certificate online and said that he got his law diploma, because that man, he ain't no lawyer. Now, there was a mass amount of evidence presented in court. There was the DNA evidence, there was transcripts, there was interviews, there was CCTV footage. This mass amount that just could not be questioned. Now, on Wednesday, June the 12th, the jurors would deliberate for 14 hours and 24 minutes. They had requested to review the DVDs of Boy B's Garda interview. They had also requested to re-examine a bit of evidence, which was the bloodied stick. They also wanted to re-examine Boy A's gloves and also the tape. And then on Tuesday, June the 18th, the people were made aware that the jury had reached their final verdict and they were ready to share that with the court. So Boy A, he was found guilty of murder and also aggravated sexual assault, and Boy B was found guilty of murder. Now, Boy A and B, they were remanded in custody until their sentencing, which took place on July the 15th, 2019. The sentencing was then adjourned until October, so they could do like psychological assessments on each of the boys. And then on November the 5th, 2019, Boy A was served a life sentence with a review period after 12 years. He also received a 12-year sentence for the aggravated sexual assault against Anna, but this sentence would run alongside the murder sentence. So like really it's 12 years. Do you know what I mean? And then Boy B, he had received a 15-year sentence with a review period after 8 years. What sickens me to my very core, right? And I know people are going to disagree with this, right? And honestly, I don't really care. Like, we're all entitled to our opinions, that's fine. In my opinion, in my heart, these boys should be locked away for life, okay? If they're not going to be locked away for life, when they're released, their identities should also be released. But that's not what's going to happen here. Because Boy A and Boy B, their identities will remain anonymous in their incarceration period, but also post-incarceration. When they're released from prison, and they will be released one day, when they're released, they will be given brand new identities and they will be allowed to go off and live a brand new life, untainted by the horrendous, horrific, heinous crimes that they committed against Ana Kriegel and taking her life away. They get a brand new life for taking away an innocent young girl's life. How is that justice? Can we just remember for a second Robert Thompson and John Venables when they killed James Bulger? They also had new identities when they left prison. And how many times has John Venables went on to reoffend? Too many more times than we can count. I'm honestly just getting so annoyed. This case made me so infuriated and so angry, and even as I talk about it, like I get a bit shaky with anger because I'm that raging. Anna's family have lost their daughter, and the world itself has lost a beautiful person with a beautiful soul. Her town has lost a beautiful, kind person. Like, no one has a bad word to say about Ana Kriegel, apart from these monsters, and also the monsters that bullied her, who also should be held accountable for what they done. I just hope and pray that somehow the Kriegel family can have some sort of closure. I don't think they will, but I just hope that they can try and live as normal a life as possible and live it in Anna's memory. I'm sure they will, because they are extraordinary people. They are kind people who, along with Anna, just did not deserve this. And I just hope that we can all remember Anna for who she was, not how she died. She was a beautiful soul. She was kind. She was passionate. She loved to sing. She loved to dance. You know, she was putting videos on YouTube. She just wanted to be someone's friend. And ultimately, this wound up with her being taken advantage of in the most heinous way and losing her life in the most awful and horrific way that she did not deserve. She, honestly, people just described her as a kind soul, whether it was her family or teachers or peers who were nice to her. And I just think it's such a huge loss that everyone has suffered by losing someone like Ana Kriegel. So please, please remember her name, keep it in your memory and think about her and pray for her family, because what they've been through and what Anna went through, no one should have to suffer. So everyone, that is the end of another True Crime and Makeup episode. I really hope this case was interesting for you to listen to and hear from my perspective. I think it was such an important one to cover, and thank you so much to the person who requested this. This was a case that was emailed over to myself, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it and what the Kriegel family went through, what poor Anna went through, so I really wanted to share it. Just so you know, I am still working through the emails that were sent over whilst I was on holiday. I was not on my emails at all, so I am slowly but surely getting back to you all. I just want to say thank you so much for being so patient whilst I was on holiday. I thought I was organised and I thought I was so slick and suave being prepared with the videos, and then Malta, your internet just played me, but I had the best time and really kind messages from you as well, so thank you so much for still supporting and watching my videos whilst I was away. We are back to my normal upload schedule, which is every Wednesday and Sunday at 7:30 British Standard Time, so please make sure that you have subscribed, put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload. In the description below you will find all the product details of what I've used on my face today, along with the links if there's anything you would like to pick up. You can also find my social media handles, so my TikTok and my Instagram. I would recommend following my Instagram because I've been posting a lot on there since I've been on holiday. So if you want to go over and, you know, like the pics, that'd be nice. Don't forget that you can request cases down below in the comments, or you can send them via my email, which is also linked down below for you. But let me know what case you want me to cover next. Please stay safe, look after each other, be a good person, don't be a bad person, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!